See where all the hunters are at today. It is still technically hunting season, so at least here in my neck of the woods. Get my notes pulled up. I forgot I have this whole document I made. You'll like this one, Ozell. Exploring ethical outdoor farming for vegans. And no, we don't have to block anybody, but definitely keep your eyes out. I saw who made you ask that. I'm not worried about blocking them, but definitely if anybody's harassing or being a nuisance, please. Appreciate you, Scott. But yeah, I made a pretty good document about that because I hear so many vegans talking about like indoor vertical farming being the only ethical farming. So wanted to kind of give the argument for why like veganic practices outdoors can actually be a net benefit to wildlife, especially compared to like traditionally regenerative agriculture. So let's see. I don't know if I want to have my hunting as conservation notes up or if I should do the invasive species. I feel like the invasive species is more difficult and I might need to reference more. Yeah, I agree, Ozell. Like, I think a lot of people just assume that like there's no way to grow outside without like worrying about pests and insects, not realizing that like veganic agriculture is like intentional about creating space for those insects. So I think there's like a lot of like misunderstanding about like veganic practices, I think. I want to do more like intentional videos on that. Oh shit. All right, that account should be added now. Welcome, welcome. Let me know if you disagree with any of these topics or if you have any questions. So hunting is not conservation because conservation is about protecting and preserving. Hunting is an exploitation or a consumptive act. Invasive species are not villains. Invasive is just a label we use, and it's often overused, in my opinion. And it does, unfortunately, moralize these species who do not, intend to be invaders or participating in any sort of war. And I think the invasive label is oftentimes used as more of a distraction from the core issues, the core ethical issues, so or ecological issues, that is, as far as invasive or non-native species. So, and then hopefully most people understand why animal agriculture is not sustainable. But I'm sure we'll have some people today that want to debate that as well. That's a pretty common anti-vegan argument, I guess, that for some reason producing less crops to just feed directly to humans and not growing all the crops for animals, somehow the sustainability is in question on that. So what's up, Cole? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well today. Trying the 3 topics out, see if we get some engagement. Last time, I think my last live was just about invasive species. So what would be the answer for feral hogs? So again, the invasive species idea I think is often overlooking like the core issue. So the issue with invasive hogs is that humans have created, these systems or changed the land in a way where these animals are now benefiting. And in most cases, the feral hogs are actually escapees from animal agriculture. So in the same way that if there were a lot of feral cats or feral dogs in an ecosystem, we wouldn't be advocating for going out and hunting them or using them as a resource. We'd be advocating for, hey, going out and compassionately trying to, rescue them or find them homes, provide them proper treatment, and reduce their impacts on the ecosystem. So in the same way that we'd want to do that for cats and dogs, we should also want to do that for feral hogs. But yeah, good question, Matt Dog. Yeah, feral hogs is probably the most common question as far as specific species being invasive. And the other one we'll probably hear is the anaconda or the snakes in the Everglades. That's probably the second most common species for wanting to advocate for culls for, at least for non-vegans, that is. So explain the hogs then. Okay. I just explained the hogs, but happy to do so again. So in the same way that we would advocate for going out and saying trying to capture cats in an ecosystem, and treat them humanely, not just harm them in an ecosystem. We'd want to take them out of that ecosystem, find them homes, or put them in shelter. We'd advocate for doing the same with hogs. So these hogs are typically escapees from animal agriculture. So the reason they're there in the first place is because of human exploitation. So we would advocate for addressing that core conflict of exploitation that initially caused the issues. Hey there, Rachel. Good to see you. Appreciate the likes. Cats actively destroy North American ecosystems. That's true. Humans also destroy North Americans' ecosystems, but we wouldn't advocate for culling humans, right? Typically, we'd advocate for trying to, capture these cats, spay and neuter them. Sometimes they would be released, especially like in not rural, but urban areas where there's, not as much impact they would have to a more intact ecosystem like in rural areas. So yeah. What's up, Bubble Mint? Good to see ya. Appreciate y'all hanging out with me. We'll see if we can get any guests today. Any ops? We've had a few in chat advocating for, or at least asking questions. So nobody's directly advocated for any unethical acts yet. So just had some questions about invasive species so far. So we always appreciate those. We'll see. We'll see. So far, everybody's just engaged on the invasive species topic, which is cool. That's definitely a controversial one. So kind of expect that. Vegans are hypocrites are here. What's up? Man, your last message to me was something else. Yeah, Rachel, if you don't know about him, yeah, you should learn about vegans. Vegans are hypocrites. He's a classic vegan troll. He likes to hang out in our spaces. So hunting of any kind is just animal murder. Correct. That is true. Right, Bubble Man? I really want to know like the full lore there, Like I feel like there's some trauma or something that contributed to that persona, but yeah, you could definitely gather, Rachel. Yeah, I can send you a screenshot of a direct message that he sent me after a very calm, like, hey, like I understand what you're sharing here is misinformation, and I'm honestly kind of worried about your hostility. And then yeah, he really doubles down on the hostility. Not in a good way. Not in a good way. Yeah, I definitely don't think some of these people realize that they're actually helping us in the algorithm by like getting enraged in our comments. There's been a few people I've like, I don't know, especially hunters that kind of get obsessed with this idea. Hey, Angelica. Hunters definitely get obsessed with this idea, like the first one here, hunting being conservation, and they want to, explain to you why they think that consuming and, participating in unnecessary exploitation of wildlife is somehow conservation, which in my mind, conservation is protection, preservation, regulating consumptive activities that might, degrade or harm ecosystems. That would be conservation. So how is hunting, which is literally killing and extracting, animals from ecosystems as resources, how would that fit into a definition, any sort of definition of conservation? But oftentimes what they're talking about are the fees that they contribute, which is kind of funny when they will reduce to that and recognize that, because then they're admitting that paying a fee or a tax is the conservation, not the actual like consumptive habit. So by that same logic, would it be conservation to, extract oil and gas from the ground if you pay the taxes, or, lease the land properly to extract oil and gas? Would that be conservation all of a sudden just because you pay, a tax that contributes to the Endangered Species Act funding? I wouldn't say so, but apparently by Hunter's logic, that would happen. So appreciate everybody hanging out here. Share this with any hunters that vegans are hypocrite. Maybe you've got some vegan hunters that you can bring over here and we can have a conversation with. I see some agriculture discussion going down in the comments. So let's see. We have someone claiming soy crops kill more animals every year versus hunting. That's interesting. So why would we compare soy harvesting, right, which is like an industrialized agriculture, with hunting? That's weird. Like maybe what if we compared hunting to, let's say, like foraging for plants and mushrooms? How many animals have to die for harvesting plants or mushrooms versus going and killing an animal, right? So maybe we can do some fair comparisons. But like somebody mentioned to you, most soy is grown for animal feed. So if you're worried about crop deaths, by going vegan or consuming a plant-based diet where you remove animal products, you are actually contributing to less crop deaths because your diet, a plant-based diet, would require less crops than an animal inclusive diet. Hunting for tofu in the supermarket. Yes. Have you ever seen? I think it was a carnivore like video where the guy goes into a supermarket with like a bow and he's like goes to the meat section and he's like, yeah, oh, and he like like launches the arrow at the pack of meat and like, oh man, that's some of that like primal cringe stuff. No, I don't know what you're talking about. Just another Honda. I don't know what kind of Discord servers you're hanging out in. 24 hours and you get $1 million. Oh, wow. Let us know who to get our check from, the blacksmith. Can we like get previous payments for the last like 5 years? That'd be cool. Yeah, yeah, I agree, Bubble Mint. They have definitely been hurt at some point. I could send you some of the screenshots because there's some telling things in some of the things he copy and paste to vegans, that could lead you, like if you have a psychologist or anybody who would be interested. Okay, so Scientific Cartman says that hunting is a form of conservation. So hunting is a form of exploitation, right? So conservation is about preservation or protection of typically natural resources. Unfortunately, animals and wildlife are considered resources by the North American model of conservation. So what you're advocating for when you say hunting is conservation, you're saying that exploitation is conservation, which is a contradiction, right? That's true. That's true. But we also have to remember that it is hunters who removed the predators or who extirpated the predators. So by trying to say that hunting is conservation, you're saying that taking resources or taking animals' lives is somehow protecting resources or animals' lives. And that doesn't really make sense. That would be a contradiction. That's right, Sarah. Good to see you here. And ampersand in the chat as well. Welcome, everybody. Love seeing all my vegan friends. Should we bring back the predators, especially into relatively densely populated regions? Absolutely, I think we should. Anywhere that is missing or has extirpated natural predators, I do believe we should either reintroduce or let them repopulate naturally. Unfortunately, hunting is also advocating for the killing of predators in these ecosystems. So most places where hunters are talking about overpopulation of deer or elk or whatever the prey species may be that they're preying upon, they are also advocating or participating in the killing of the predators who would naturally keep those prey species in check. So yeah, doesn't really make sense. But yeah, we definitely advocate for reintroduction of predators and protection of predators to help with natural ecosystem regulation. My grandpa took me hunting once when I was 5. Yeah, that's funny. I've actually hunted internationally, so I've been to other countries to hunt. So yeah, I'm not trying to gloat or anything, but I was very much an active hunter for over 2 decades of my life, almost 28 years. All of the years I was non-vegan, I was raised in the country here in the southeastern United States, and definitely participated in lots of hunting every single year. So. But yeah, no, my grandpa actually didn't hunt. That's funnily enough. So that was something my dad taught me. What are we cracking up about, Keith? About earthfish guys. Nice. Sometimes I hunt and eat. Sometimes I pass. I also forage. Foraging's cool. Jesse, I would ask, like, why do you think it's okay, like nowadays, to be hunting animals when we don't need to? And would you disagree with like hunting not being conservation? Way too much meat. But by consuming deer or whatever animal you're hunting, you're consuming more meat, right? There's actually studies that show when legal hunting or legal sale of wild game meat is allowed, that actually increases the meat consumption. It doesn't decrease the meat consumption. So, what does vegan or hypocrites want? What does he want to hear? Actual formal response considering the things I've just let me read what you said, scientific. Honestly, don't even see anything that you brought up. Yeah, I don't. If you want to restate it in the comments, happy to respond to it. Scientific Cartman. Looks like you're running away though, so I don't know what. I don't see anything I can give you a formal response to. So. Hey, what's up, buddy? Good to see you, Herb. Are you talking to me or vegans are hypocrite? I'm trying to find if anybody saw what Scientific Cartman was trying to argue there. I mean, he started with some hunting is not conservation discussion. I burn a lot of calories a day. A vegan, I don't have the same energy output. Yeah, so first off, veganism isn't a diet, but you can definitely get the same amount of calories, that you would get on a omnivorous diet. So, not really sure what you mean. There's lots of high density, high nutrient dense vegan foods. So, vegans are hypocrites. Got some YouTube links for you. nose goes for the vegans to click the link and watch the first 5 seconds of that. A lot of popular regime. I will look into others. Yeah, Jesse, you should check out like plant-based diets and the benefits that you can get. Not to mention that you would avoid unnecessary exploitation of animals, and reduce your harm that you're causing. And yeah, I definitely challenge you to do some more foraging and less killing animals, to put it bluntly. Tell me about the sunfish. Yeah, sunfish are cool. They live in the water, and you should leave them there. Isn't I'm not sure what sunfish you're talking about. I mean, there are sunfish that like live in ponds, but then there are also like huge sunfish in the ocean as well. So I'm not sure what you're talking about, hypocrite. I'm not clicking your link. I'm on a live right now. Yeah, I figured it was oceanic sunfish. I'm honestly not well researched on them. Hunters always has and will be. Got 4 deer in my downstairs fridge. Okay, so you've just described, a resource, the meat, the deer you're describing as a resource in your fridge. So explain to me how exploiting wildlife, right, killing and taking their bodies out of the ecosystem, is somehow preserving or protecting wildlife. That's my whole point with the hunting is not conservation, because hunting is a consumptive act, right? You're basically treating a wild animal as a resource. You're unaliving them or killing them, and taking their body out of the ecosystem, extracting their energy from the ecosystem, and then you're enjoying it, and you're considering it conservation somehow. So we prefer soy man here. So life of chomps. Not sure what you're saying, Crusader. Nature is a game of resources. So it sounds like you're starting to like appeal to nature fallacy, Alex Sierre. I'm not really sure like what you're trying to say. I mean, if nature is a game of resources, does that justify like unnecessarily harming others for resources you don't need? I can see you have no idea what you're talking about. Okay, Zerk, would you like to request up and tell me what you think I don't know what I'm talking about? Our teeth are meant to eat meat and vegetables. We are omnivores. So omnivory doesn't imply that we have to consume both. If you're an omnivore, that means you could consume either or. So yeah, there's no obligation just by your biology. If you look far enough back throughout history, through our ancestors, you're going to notice that we ate a lot more plants than animals. It was a lot more difficult and required a lot more calories to burn and a lot more risk to go out and hunt. We were a lot more of opportunistic scavengers than we were of actual hunters, typically, until we developed tools, of course. If you don't hunt, the animals will overpopulate, eat all the vegetation, and then die of starvation. Yeah, so I mean, okay, there's so much to unpack there. So overpopulation. First off, why are there no natural predators in these ecosystems that would naturally be balancing, the overpopulation as you claim? Well, that's because hunters have extirpated them, or they continue to hunt the predators to a point where they can't perform their full, regulation in the ecosystem, their typical mechanistic regulation. And then, but yeah, the Yellowstone study, where they basically studied vegetation levels throughout Yellowstone prior to the reintroduction of wolves. When they reintroduced wolves, after a few years, they noticed that the changes in the ecosystem because of the wolves, both the movement and migration of deer, but also the regulation of their population, or elk, excuse me, in Yellowstone, was better managed by the natural predators. So that would be the best solution. Rather than continue to exploit wildlife, we should, let wildlife do what wildlife does and be natural. Well, Stephen, you're welcome to request up, but it sounds like you probably just don't have an argument. So Tiny Man 2.0 is exploiting and harming animals right now, everyone. It's what I want. Okay, Austin, what does that have to do with anything? I want others to stop unnecessarily harming others. How about that? If we're all sharing here. Oh, you find harming animals funny. You might want to talk to your therapist about that one. Although they might commit you at that point. Maybe don't tell them, but maybe you should talk to your loved ones about that. Why you find harming animals funny. Don't have a clue about conservation. Taking advice from somebody that's never hunted. Are you saying I've never hunted? I mean, I could pull up some pictures of me holding dead animals from 10 years ago if that's what you need, but I'm not going to do that. What is Crusader arguing about now? Yeah, the problem is that hunting doesn't help balance nature. It's a disruption, right? Like hunting is quite literally disrupting ecosystems. Like what you're advocating for is unnecessarily going out into an ecosystem and treating a wild animal that you don't need to exploit as a resource, and you're killing them, taking them from their family, taking them from their home, and consuming them when you're just going to go to the store and buy other dead animal parts anyway. Like it doesn't make any sense. If you allowed nobody to hunt, the animals would die off. Open a book. I would love to know what book you think I should read. Like, honestly, can you name one book, Charles? Like, name one book. What about those in Arctic climates who cannot grow plants? Yeah, I mean that's a valid question. Part of veganism is as far as practicable and possible. So people in situations where they don't have options, they don't have options. So they have to do what's best for them. But the good thing about being in 2025 and going into 2026 is that we have a global supply system. We ship food all over the world, and nearly every part of the planet is connected through travel now, for better or worse. But we can definitely get plant-based diets just about everywhere. But there are people who are in positions where they can't, and we're not talking to those people. We're talking to you on TikTok right now. And it still wouldn't be conservation, even if they were hunting and consuming them out of necessity. It still wouldn't be conservation. So. Yeah, I told you, Ozell, man. Nobody wants to request up on these topics. They just want to hide and chat. Global supply system is worse for the world than hunting. What about, is it worse for the animals being exploited, do you think? Yeah, excessive deer population causes tons of issues. What about excessive human population? Would we advocate for going and culling humans just because they're damaging the ecosystem? I don't think so. That's silly. We would address the core problems, right? Like our consumptive habits, or the ecosystem that's causing the overpopulation. Like, are there predators in this ecosystem? Is the land being used in ways that increase the carrying capacity for animals? Those are the things we would look at if we actually cared about solving the issue and not just continuing exploitation. So animals get to eat each other because they're patients, right? They're moral patients. They don't have morals, or even a grocery store like you and I. They don't have options, right? So it's not that they get to, it's that they have to. They absolutely have to. It's out of necessity. If humans were running into streets and causing car accidents, we would do something. Don't people already do that? I mean, yeah. Would we? I don't think we'd start culling humans. That's silly. Why don't you talk to Ted Nugent? Yeah, Charles. Yeah. I think talking to Ted Nugent about his crop decimus info would actually be hilarious, to be honest. Veganism is 10 times worse for the environment. I would like you to come up and explain that, Isma. And that's a funny name, by the way. That's hilarious. But you're probably not old enough to have the conversation based on the name. We work best with the balanced diet. Well, guess what? You can have a balanced diet on a plant-based diet, and you can actually reduce your all-cause mortality risk, as well as risk of colon cancer, as well as various other diseases. So we actually work best on a well-planned plant-based diet. Ben can't keep logical consistency. All right. What have I not been consistent on? Just check the money trail from where most funding for conservation comes from in the US. Actually, I would love for you to tell me where you think that ends, because actually, if you look at the money, right, hunters want to talk about how much they contribute to conservation, but it's funny, they contribute less than 10% compared to the general public. So hunters are not contributing to conservation. They're contributing to the regulations that are required to them for them to not over exploit the deer population, right? So hunters are quite literally being taxed and regulated so that they don't over exploit, right? That's not conservation. If you were to say that's conservation because they're paying fees and taxes, you would also have to say that oil and gas companies are participating in conservation by mining and fracking, right? Because they pay fees that go towards conservation. That's silly. That's ridiculous. But even if you do actually research where funding comes from, like legitimate sources of funding for conservation, Pittman-Robertson Act in the last data I was looking at was like 2019. It was like $1.1 billion, which seems like a lot, right? That's a lot of money from hunters. But when you look at other forms of conservation, like soil and water conservation through the USDA, right, the United States federal, government, for focusing on land and water through the Department of Agriculture, that's $6 billion. 6 billion, right? So that's 6 times what hunters are contributing just in that one small section. Now, the USDA is not the only federal, funder for different conservation projects like land and water. We also have acts like the Endangered Species Act, right, which receives funding from not hunters, right? It's actually from the public. So hunters are not the primary contributors to funding for conservation. And again, they're being taxed because they're participating in a consumptive act. So if hunting stops, you got to think about that hunters are also unaliving or killing the predators in ecosystems, right? So you got to think here in the eastern United States, we have basically unlimited killing for coyotes. We also have hunting for bear, fox. Pretty much any kind of predator is open game. Some have seasons, some don't. Like the coyotes, they don't even have a season, so they could be killed at any point throughout the year. So if we stop hunting, we also stop hunting the predators and the prey, right? And nature has been doing just fine before humans were here as far as regulating these ecosystems. So it's not humans' role to regulate overpopulation. If anything, we're contributing to the overpopulation by seeing these animals as resources and contributing to systems that continue to perpetuate this idea. Vegans are hypocrites. You mentioned India. Did you know that India has banned all hunting? Look that up. India, and there was one other country. Where was it? Um, I know Kenya has banned all hunting. They do just ecotourism. But yeah, there's a few successful like entire countries that have completely banned hunting. So if those predators see us as prey, panda, I mean, natural predators already exist. They already are predators that see us as prey, like mountain lions and stuff. Like there are other species, right, that see us as prey. We're not like apex predators or something. But even those species typically are frightened of us because we tend to be in noisy areas or making lots of noise or smell weird or whatever. But yeah, just because predators see us as prey doesn't mean we can go out and exploit and harm them unnecessarily. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. I mean, we could go and hunt, humans who have disproportionate impacts on ecosystems, but we wouldn't do that because that's immoral. That's ridiculous. Less deer to go to hunters, the more hit my car and starve. What? If you're saying that like hunting reduces car fatalities, is actually the opposite because during hunting season there's actually more car fatalities with deer because of the disruption that hunting causes. So let's see. It looks like we might actually have an adult. Austin, bring you up, Austin. Seemed like a first adult request for the day.
What's up, man?
Hey, Austin, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Uh,
Good. Go ahead. What do you have for me?
well, I just think that we are supposed to eat meat. I think that, like, naturally it's good for our bodies. I think that when you don't eat meat, it lowers your testosterone and it makes you more weak. I think it's good for you. I think it's natural. I think if God made the world, then we are supposed to eat meat because he gave it for us. And I think if there is no God, then from an evolutionary standpoint, that we should be able to do whatever we want that's best for us.
Okay, so we can go through some of those. So you're saying that you think not consuming meat would be unhealthy? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of proven benefits for those that have like gone through like the carnivore diet, for example. There's a lot of benefits to that, like lowering
What
risk of
what e-
disease.
what
But
evidence would you have that the carnivore diet is like healthy or contributes to good health?
I mean, for me personally, when I wasn't eating that way and I was just kind of eating a lot of breads and like just like processed foods or like just like more vegetables, I was feeling slower and weaker. And then when I started moving to eating more steak and more just like pure meats, besides pigs, for some reason, like pig and like pork, that does
So
not make me feel good.
So
Um,
Austin, what you're giving me though, like I asked for evidence, and you're kind of giving me like I felt better, and that would be like an anecdote, right? Like I could say the exact same thing. I could be like, well, when I switched to a vegan diet, from eating lots of meat to a vegan diet or a plant-based diet, I felt a lot better. My blood results were better. Like I could tell you the same thing, but that wouldn't really be evidence, right? That would be like an anecdote. So what I'm asking for is like scientific evidence because here on my side of things, on the plant-based diet side, we actually have scientific evidence that shows a well-planned plant-based diet can not only be healthy, but it can actually provide health benefits, right? It can reduce your risk for certain diseases and help with longevity. And not to mention the environmental impact are far reduced when you compare it to an animal inclusive diet. So I don't think there's really the evidence you might think there is for the carnivore diet. So I would encourage you, like if you're not familiar with like nutrition and health, scientific evidence for these, maybe you should do some more research on that and see what you find. I would
I mean,
push you
people like
to
Steve Jobs, for example, went to like all just completely vegetables and fruits, and then they ended up dying. There's been several people that have made like big points about
so
switching to
hold on,
only
hold
eating
on, hold on,
fruits.
hold on, Austin. Steve Jobs died of cancer.
Why do you think he got it?
that has nothing. Like, what does that have to do? Like, we're just making conjecture at this point, right? Like that doesn't tell us anything about the health impacts. So again, this would be like an anecdote,
Yeah, he
right?
died from
So when
pancreatic
you come
cancer based on what
when
his
you come
diet
to the
was.
table, when you come to the table and you say, I think this is healthier, but then all you have so far is like two random anecdotes. It's not really, contributing to the discussion, right? Because I presented you with scientific evidence. It's actually a meta-analysis, right, where they review a lot of different studies, and some of the top nutritionists and dietetics review all these studies, and they come together and they conclude this, right? So that's the kind of evidence I'd be looking for as somebody who cares about science. I wouldn't care about anecdotes. I wouldn't care about this one person's experience. I care about like science, right? And the scientific method where we can kind of step back and look at a larger empirical, situation, right? Where we can look at data, not just like random anecdotes. So let's go ahead and say, maybe the nutrition argument isn't for you because maybe you haven't looked up, the benefits of a well-planned plant-based diet. But then your second argument was about religion, right? Did you say that you think if there is a God, you believe God would want you to consume animals? Was that right?
Yeah, that we're supposed to consume animals basically based on creation, except pork.
Okay. But so let's step back a little bit more. So, you would say that your God is like a loving God, right? And like merciful and compassionate.
Uh, for the most part.
Yeah. Okay. And so, like, would God want you to make decisions that cause less harm to, like, others in his creation? Or would he say, like, he doesn't really care what you do, like, harm as many other individuals as you want?
Well, we're not supposed to harm other people, but I mean, he did call for animal sacrifice. So
So we're talking about the Bible, right?
yeah, I mean, or the Quran.
Okay, well, the Bible specifically, I think, says that Jesus was supposed to be the last blood sacrifice. And there are Christians who interpret that kind of as like we shouldn't consume animals anymore. But like going back again, like if you believe that your God is like merciful, compassionate, and he wants you to like reduce your amount of harm, like not just like cause unnecessary amounts of harm, wouldn't God want you to, choose a diet that causes less harm to like others that He created in your worldview?
No, I think that he gave us everything for our own benefit. I think he knows that we are made in his image and he made the whole world for us. So I think everything is for us and it's made for our consumption and made for our betterment as long as it's in the restraints of moderation. I think anything without moderation isn't good. Like I think if you're just going to like trophy hunt and go kill like these beautiful animals just for the sake of killing it, that's a messed up thing. But I think it's obvious that like we were made with our palates to enjoy the taste of a chicken or a cow or whatever animal. I think it's just wired within us to enjoy these things, and I think you can't over like complicate it. I think there's a reason why it tastes good. I think there's a reason why it helps build muscle. I think there's a reason why every animal that's a predator goes and hunts and gets animals for their flesh and eats them. I think we forget that we're also animals too. I think we forget that. I think we've gotten lost with all these books and complicated theories over stuff that we just overlook it. We're one of the animals on this world too.
I definitely agree that we're animals. So we were on the topic of like why you think your religion justifies, eating animals, but you brought up like pleasure, and I think that's like a really, really scary, justification to try to use, right? Because I can think of a lot of different things that might bring somebody pleasure, but would be extremely immoral, right? Surely you can imagine some of that without me, giving you some examples, right?
What would be immoral? What'd you say?
Like there are things that we can derive pleasure from that would be immoral, right?
Yeah.
So just because something brings pleasure doesn't mean that it would be morally justified, right? Like if I enjoy like harming a dog, that doesn't justify harming the dog. right?
No. Yeah, of course.
So let's recognize that like pleasure is definitely not a justification for like harming others, right? We can
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the killing for the sake of killing is not a good thing. But
yeah.
killing to use it to build yourself up is good.
Okay, so if I decided that like I needed to kill somebody else for, building myself up, you would say that that act would be morally justified.
Well, from my personal religious beliefs, no. But if you are in the situation where just say there's like no one on the entire earth and it's just like bare, yeah, you know what? There's no justification for it. I don't think you can ever kill another human. I think
I
that's
agree.
pretty messed up. And
Yeah.
I don't think animals really do that as well. I've said a few specific ones, perhaps like when a mother will sacrifice her body so like the children can eat on it, and some like I think there's like insects that do that.
Hmm. Sorry, that just threw me off. I have no idea what that had to do with anything.
I was just trying to think of an example of like a species eating itself. Like I know
Yeah.
some birds eat smaller birds.
Yeah,
Um,
but I mean, there are other species, right, that we would extend like this same idea of like we wouldn't want to harm them if we didn't need to, right? Like I think you and I would both agree that if we don't need to like harm a dog or a cat, we shouldn't, right? Like that's a simple kind of thing. Like if we don't need to harm someone like a dog or a cat or really anybody who can experience harm, why should we, right? Like
yeah,
if we don't need to, we shouldn't.
I agree. I think it's also like a luxury though, because like if you're in a country that's really impoverished and you like have to eat, I
Yeah.
don't think it's wrong if you ate a dog or cat in that situation.
Sure. I mean, but that's somebody outside of that, right? Like that's going back and saying, oh, well, they don't have it, right? But
Yeah, yeah.
like you and I here, we most likely both go to grocery stores. We most likely maybe go to a restaurant every once in a while, and we make choices in what we get to consume. And now in 2025, we have the luxury of consuming a plant-based diet and understanding the nutritional, benefits of that through technology or through, a professional, nutritionist. We can figure these things out. So that means that it's no longer a necessity for us to go out and hunt or to go out and even consume meat. And both of those acts, whether it's me going out and hunting an animal in the wild, or me going to the grocery store and paying somebody, to give me this prepackaged, flesh, both of those actions cause unnecessary harm for us, right? Or well, they are us causing unnecessary harm, right, or contributing to it. So I would say in both of those situations, for you and I, we both should choose an option that doesn't cause that harm because we have the option, right?
Do you think being a vegan is the result of having the ultimate luck and luxury of being in the wealthiest place in the world and having the option to do that while
I
other
mean,
people don't get that luxury?
that's definitely an interesting question. And I think like I can definitely see why somebody would see like modern veganism that way and like modern plant-based diets because, most people when they hear like vegan diet or plant-based diet, they're thinking like, these fake meats and, all these like fancy processed products. But in reality, like, I mean, the plant-based diet has been around for thousands of years. There are Jains who religiously were basically vegan or vegetarian. So there are historically people in these what you would call like maybe underdeveloped or less privileged areas who have made these choices and still choose a choice that harms less individuals. So I don't think it's necessarily a privilege, but I do think that most of us, if anything, like choosing the option of consuming somebody else's flesh, right? When you don't need to, like that would be like a privilege, I guess, but it's also like a disgustingly immoral one, right? So I don't even think that's like a privilege. But I
Yeah.
think people abuse that.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're all trying to fill our lives with meaning. And, there's a quote like where Nietzsche said, God is dead. And I think we're seeing the results of that in society where we see people not having enough meaning. And I think perhaps like we're replacing in a lot of ways our worship for God for another thing that gives us meaning. I think this could just be another example of that
Could you
because it
elaborate?
feels meaningful. It
Why do you
feels like
say that?
okay, like huh?
Could you elaborate? Because like in my eyes, it's kind of like the way I see it is like if I were to believe in say your God, right, and I believed everything from let's just say the Bible, right, because I grew up Christian, so I'm most familiar with it. So if I were to say like I agree that God created the universe and all of these creatures, but I also agreed that God was all loving, right? Like I can't comprehend why an all loving God would say it's okay to harm others when you don't need to, right? So in my mind, if I were religious, I would say, of course, God wouldn't want me unnecessarily harming others. That would not be in loving image. That would not be me acting in the image of a loving God. So it's kind of weird to hear you kind of flip it and try to say like, oh, vegans aren't like they're lost somehow of meaning because like I'm expressing to you that I think there's this value in sentient individuals like animals and humans, right? That is so valuable that we should not, treat it as just like a frivolous thing. We shouldn't just, exploit for pleasure, and we shouldn't exploit unnecessarily. But you're kind of giving me this argument of like, well, because I have this connection that you don't have, I get to exploit and harm others unnecessarily, and that just doesn't really make sense in my like rational brain. So how would you like explain that vegans who don't believe in a god, and by the way, there are vegans who are Christian and vegan Muslims, and there are vegans who are religious. So but specifically, why would you think that vegans who don't believe in a god would be lost, or just explain to me what you were trying to say in that?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, like everybody, everything that exists on this world dies. So it's like going back to the religious thing, I guess. Like God obviously like doesn't have the same like description of what love is based on not killing something because he can wipe out whatever he wants. Like if the Bible is real, he flooded the whole world and killed all the animals in the entire world that existed at a whim, and he can just bring them back up. I think that the only thing that truly has inherent real value in a meaningful way to God that is worth not killing is a human life. I think that animals were given to us to not abuse, to not mistreat, because God, He literally says that He cares for the birds of the sky. Like, look at the birds of the sky. Like, if your heavenly Father feeds them, will He not feed you as well? So, God obviously does care for animals and doesn't want them to be harmed. But I think at the end of the day that we were made to consume them. It says we were made to consume them. There's absolute benefits like testosterone levels when you eat meat go up, and I think that that's a leading
What
cause of a
makes
lot
you
of
say that
sadness in
though?
our society is low testosterone.
Austin, what makes you say that though? Because I guarantee you that you don't have a study on that because I've never seen
No,
it before.
I don't have a study where I can reference something on hand, but I've seen several like people that have like gone through processes of going into the carnivore diet and then seeing the benefits of it. And they're all more
But
masculine. Like if you look at a vegan and you just like look at like a whole list of people that are vegan and look at their profiles versus people that are doing like more carnivore eating, you can just see the difference on them. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like
but Austin,
physicality,
I mean,
voice wise, prowess.
do you remember Austin when we were talking about like the like my standard for evidence? Do you remember like what I said about anecdotes?
Yeah, like right now, I will not be able to present you exact evidence because I was just kind of scrolling through TikTok board, and then I just saw this and wanted to
Yeah,
talk. So like, I'm not gonna have evidence. You got to prepare for a debate if you're gonna have like
if,
a,
if you do want to look into that topic, if you want to check out the website in my bio, like my personal website, I have a bunch of studies that are specifically about testosterone, linked on the health, I think, document or the vegan reference document, and you'll actually find the opposite is actually true. And if you look at blood work of carnivores versus like people on a plant-based diet, you'd probably change your tune really quick. And if do you have Netflix by chance or access
no,
to it?
I deleted all my my stuff like that. I just try to read books, and then occasionally my sweet treat of the week is going on TikTok once in a while.
Cool. All good. Well, there's a really good documentary called Game Changers. It might be elsewhere too. Like if you find content elsewhere, you might be able to find it. Game Changers, and it goes over a plant-based diet specifically for athletes. And it addresses this exactly what you're talking about, the testosterone claims. It also talks about blood flow to a specific area for men of importance. And they do tests, like a real time test, and they show you the results on football players. It would be worth checking out that. It's called Game Changers. It is on Netflix, but you might find it elsewhere. So
Hey, I got an open mind. I probably would check that out. That's cool, man.
cool.
Hey,
Yeah, I
thank
mean,
you for
awesome.
entertaining this conversation. You're a
Yeah.
smart guy, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. It was respectful, and that's about all you can ask for on TikTok. And yeah, it was a
For
good
sure.
discussion.
Heck yeah, man. Have a wonderful day, brother.
You too. Peace.
Peace.
Yeah, sorry. Create, preserve, maintain. I know my mic's bad. Like I've switched between like this microphone, but it like messes my stand up. So it might just be because I'm speaking too loud in my small room here. But let me know if it continues to be an issue. Yeah, I didn't know Game Changers was on Netflix. That's good to know. I like hunting white-tailed deer here in Texas. Vegas Raiders, do you think that's conservation or do you recognize that as exploitation of wildlife? Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, I think when I speak like really loud, there's some echoing. It might even be my case like vibrating against my phone. So if it's bad, please let me know and we'll try to figure it out together. We process and stock our freezers, right? So further describing how you're treating them as a resource that you extracted. Correct. Understood. But yeah, that was a pretty good combo with Austin. I always like really struggle with the religious justifications for that because it's like it just to me is so blaringly obvious that if you're advocating for unnecessarily or preferentially, exploiting and harming others, why would you use a loving God to justify that? Like that, it's kind of a defeater of yourself, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me, but I know others see that similarly. It's all good, Vegas. You can hang out in the comments with us. Oh, thanks, Bubble Man. Honestly, like I have to like be in the right mindset for sure. I had a really good day, like hanging out with all the rescues, and nobody overwhelmed me today. But normally, normally all my patience is devoted to our rescue animals. So our 13, actually now 14 cats. We just trapped another stray cat outside of our building, so we're gonna get him some medical care. He's our first like ginger baby, so our first yellow or orange cat. Why is it not for you? Why is avoiding the unnecessary exploitation of others not a position you want to take, Vegas? I'm interested. Yeah, I mean, I grew up loving to hunt and fish and barbecuing. I grew up butchering animals. So yeah, I mean, that doesn't make it right just because you enjoy doing something, especially when it's harming others. That's right, Ben. Did you get a new profile picture? I think that's the Ben I know. Maybe not. Maybe I don't know this Ben. Ben's from Seattle. Welcome. It is the future, Ben. I agree. A vegan hunter. Yeah, you could be a vegan hunter. You could hunt for tofu. You could hunt for mushrooms or plants. Just you don't have to kill others and harm them or use them. That's cool. I'm glad you don't have issues with others, choosing to avoid unnecessary exploitation, but I'm interested like why you wouldn't also want to align your actions, with that idea of avoiding unnecessary exploitation. Ridley asks, what is vegan farming? So, veganic farming is a set of practices where we avoid the use and exploitation of animals. So, we don't use any types of animal products, such as the fertilizers like different manures or bone meal or blood meal or different derivatives of animal products that are often used in agriculture. And we also do practices that contribute to healthy ecosystems and also reduce the amount of harm to wildlife and ecosystems. So, hunting for animals to respect and admire. That's right. That's a good one. Yeah, you could like hunt them like in photography, birding is a really cool activity. Compost worms. Yeah, so we're not exploiting worms when they just exist in the soil or in a compost pile. Now, if somebody were like buying worms and bringing worms into a system, technically that would be like purchasing animal products. But yeah, we're not. Vegans aren't exploiting worms in our agriculture. Can you expand on the invasive doesn't equal villain? Yeah, absolutely. So this idea is basically that invasive species, this label is oftentimes moralizing species. So it's describing intentionality. To call somebody an invader means that they intend to come into your space and cause harm or, exploit or do something, come into a space intentionally. So it's describing intentionality to species who do not have this intention and are just who are acting from their basic biology. So yeah, that's the idea behind the invasive is not always a villain. Obviously, like invasive species are an issue in ecology and in protecting ecosystems, but there are non-violent ways, ways that we can manage these populations, whether they be animal species or plant species, without like causing destruction and harm. So yeah, we would advocate for nonviolent management of invasive species. What about animals in the field eating the veggies? Well, one, you could say that it's self-defense, so you're protecting your crops. But in veganic agriculture, we actually avoid, targeting animals as pests, like conventional farming or, conventional practices would. And we would use nonviolent deterrence or exclusion zones to prevent animals from, coming into an area where they might be harmed or to scare animals away. Typically, even the scaring animals away, we want to avoid like fear-based deterrence. So typically, we would try to use sounds that aren't going to like completely scare them, but will kind of give them an indication that hey, maybe you shouldn't be in this area. Air cannons, yeah, technically, especially on larger scale areas, those can definitely be effective. But again, like if there are other ways that we can even use methods that don't involve fear, we would advocate for those as well. So like fencing, um, stuff like that, or other visual deterrents. What would be nonviolent management of kudzu? So kudzu is actually an interesting one because the area I'm in, it was actually originally introduced for erosion control and also for fodder for animals. So over time, less people as hay production and other industrialized management for different agriculture in this area have changed. People relied less on kudzu as like a crop or a feed for their animals. So that stopped being managed and now it's seen as kind of like a plant to be upset with. But there are like uses for kudzu. The root has medicinal and herbal uses. The vines can be turned into fibers. You can use them for making rope or baskets. I actually have a friend who that's his business. He turns bamboo and kudzu into beautiful works of art. So there's lots of uses for some of these species that are considered invasive. But if we manage them or work with them in a certain way, we can reduce their ecological impacts. And it doesn't involve like, harming sentient individuals. Shrews, snakes, and other rodents don't just turn around when they see a fence. That's true. That's true. That's a good point. But when in the same way, like when I'm out like walking, if I accidentally step on an ant, I wasn't intending to harm that ant. In the same way, if I don't till, but if I were, tilling a field, my intention is not to go out and till up snakes and shrews and rodents, right? So what you're describing is like, sure, we can't prevent all deaths in our current agricultural practices, but that doesn't mean that it's justified to go out and intentionally harm others. So why are you farming vegans? Because we need more vegans, that's why. That's funny. You're actually one of the first people. I've thought about that before, how that could be interpreted, and you might be the first person to actually point that out. How is hunting not the biggest form of conservation? Good question, Matt. So hunting is a consumptive act, right? Hunting is the act of going into an ecosystem, targeting an animal, and killing them, taking their body out of the ecosystem, consuming or using their body, and then, you're done. And that would be a consumptive, exploitative act. Conservation is about protection, preservation, and regulation of exploitative acts, right? So hunting is in contradiction with conservation. Just because hunters pay a fee to go hunt and kill an animal, that does not mean that they are participating in conservation. Actually, the opposite. If anything, you could say that the fees and the regulations of hunting are conservation, but to say that hunting is conservation would be to also admit that like other forms of extractive or consumptive practices would be considered conservation. So that's kind of just silly. Hunting low key is mostly for sport as well, from what I've seen. Yeah, that's very true. I mean, where I grew up, hunting was 100% for sport. It was always like, yeah, you get to fill the freezer, right? But the reason you did it was for entertainment, right? It was to go to hunt camp with, a bunch of guys, hang out, drink alcohol, whatever, have a good time, and then go out and harm animals. And that was 100 for, it was not out of necessity. It was 100% for sport, 100% for entertainment. I mean, I've been to other countries and participated in those types of activities, and it's always about sport. There, of course, are people who are dependent on hunting still, but most people participating in hunting are not subsistence hunters. They're not dependent on hunting to feed themselves. It's just supplementary, and it's a form of entertainment for people, which is really sad when you really step back and think about what's happening. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely used to hunt, so I get you. Create, preserve, maintain. I totally get you. Yeah, and I think the biggest like frustration for me is that people will try to make that claim, but then ignore the fact that they're still going to, the grocery store or to restaurants and like purchasing these other animal products. Stacy, nice to meet you. But yeah, like these hunters are typically like the hunters I know are the biggest meat consumers like that I know, right? Like they go out and they hunt, but that meat that they're getting from hunting, the animal flesh is supplementary. Like they're still consuming the same amount of steak, same amount of burgers, same amount of hot dog and sausage. Like all of that is unchanged. Them going out and hunting birds or rabbit or deer or whoever they're targeting, it's supplementary to their diet. It's not required, and not necessary. That's true. I mean, I can understand that thought, Erm. She definitely I don't know if she's all advocacy is in some way good, but there's definitely some advocates who can do a bit more harm than others. So who cares about this? Well, I care. People who care about others, people who have empathy, I would say care. I think most people care, but unfortunately, I think our conditioning and apathy that we receive from a young age kind of makes it a lot more difficult for us to empathize with animals, especially the ones we've seen as resources. So, yeah, I think a lot of people care. And I think a lot more people would care if they engage in, ethical discussions about their actions. So, nice. Like to see all the caring. Definitely a lot of empathy there. That's true. I don't see the reduction in harm when the lack of population control would result in worse suffering. Okay. I mean, there's a few different ways we could go with this. Hey, Donna, good to see you. Hey, Tofu. So reducing harm. So the idea here would be like a utilitarian argument. Okay, so you're saying that by going out and unaliving individuals that you say would end up maybe starving or having some sort of disease, you're saying you intentionally going and unaliving those individuals would be better, right? So would the same situation apply to other individuals? Would we say like, oh, we could reduce suffering if we start, unaliving certain individuals with a, reduced immune response to certain things, or reducing the populations of certain individuals, like humans, that would, maybe be more inclined to be suffering in certain cases. I don't think we would hold to that same logic there. Um, but yeah, Stacy, yeah, I can follow up with you after this. But yeah, I don't think the idea that like we should go out and reduce populations holds up like ethically. You could definitely try to make like utilitarian arguments if you could like say this is definitely going to happen, but still the intentionality is you going and harming individuals, right? So there's a whole difference between you choosing to go and harm individuals for some purpose versus you not doing an action and individuals being harmed, right? So this idea that we need to jump into nature and start to manage, nature and try to choose which individuals suffer is kind of like silly, especially when most of us are making decisions every single day that intentionally causes harm, right? Like there's unavoidably causes harm, I should say. So yeah, this idea that we should reduce population for that reason is kind of silly. My days of eating are kind of like random. It really depends on the day because running a sanctuary is takes a lot of work, so I don't always have time to eat multiple meals a day. But yeah, I honestly nowadays I eat kind of like a vegan junk diet, but I do eat a lot of whole foods as well. Eat a lot of like sweet potatoes. We do some breads like pizzas and stuff like that every once in a while. But yeah, my diet's kind of all over the place. But I originally like went plant-based for health like benefits. So I'm pretty well educated on like a healthy diet. I'm just don't always have time to do the healthiest diet. But hunting is an amazing sport, and I love getting my own meat. Okay, so two parts here. Hunting as a sport, right? Can you name one other sport where the other team doesn't know they're playing? Just name one other sport where the other team doesn't even know they're playing. And just because you love, taking someone's flesh doesn't mean it's okay to take someone's flesh. So fishing, fish feel pain. So still don't need to be fishing. Ice climbing? It's just like random words in the comments now. Hey, what's up, Fox Lady? Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Trying to combat some of the hunting and farmer misinformation as always. So okay, so Matthew had asked again, like about the overpopulation, what my proposed solution would be because he says starvation is worse than being shot. I don't know about that, man. Like I've been a part of some deer hunts where the deer was shot in a way that I definitely would not want to be shot. So I've helped track deer for like a mile from where they were shot. So no, it's not always better to be shot. That's that kind of tells me you maybe haven't been hunting before. But yeah. But yeah, my proposal would be one, reintroducing and protecting predators in ecosystems where these overpopulations of prey are occurring. Two would be focusing on carrying capacity and the land use in those areas. And three, I think just education of people about the importance of healthy ecosystems. I think that would be a pretty good management strategy that would handle overpopulation. But there's also more extreme interventions like sterilization, capture and relocation of individuals, etc. So there's all sorts of options besides treating others as resources. So Matthew, I mean, I don't know. Like this is kind of weird because you're saying like we should go out and hunt individuals. So would you advocate for like going and hunting just the deer who are starving? And how would you know that? Would you like select starving deer to harm and consume? Because I don't think that's what most hunters are doing. They're not out there taking the sickest individuals to help, with the ecosystem. That's what natural predators do. But yeah, to try to say like, oh, they might starve or they're going to starve, so I should go intentionally harm more more individuals. That's really silly. What if I just like killing things? Well, you can't really kill things, right? Because things are objects. So yeah, you would be killing someone or individuals. We are a natural predator. I don't know, like we're in the great ape family. Like great apes typically tend to be more herbivorous or frugivores. So our eyesight is really indicative of that. Most other carnivores or omnivores don't have the same type of eyesight we do. You can look at a lot of different biological indicators that show that we're not carnivores, bro. We're not predators. We don't have huge fangs. We don't have huge claws. Like nobody can unalive, large animals with their bare hands. We use tools. It was because our brain. It was because of fire. It was because of cooking like tubers on fires. Like yeah, it's not how you think it is, man. It's funny how many people say they're in a deer stand, but like I don't know, y'all are hunting in the suburbs or something, or y'all on that MAGA mobile. Okay, y'all got some upgraded MAGA mobile? Time to do a reset on your FYP. Yeah, sure. So should we ban natural predators too because we do the exact same thing? Okay, Hunter. So that's a really kind of silly question, but we can definitely address it. So you're saying like since vegans want to avoid unnecessary harm, you think that vegans would also want to stop predators. So the problem you're missing there is that what predators are participating in is not unnecessary. It is quite necessary for them. They don't have grocery stores. They don't have, the ability to be able to communicate and reason and rationalize between, moral choices, right? They are moral patients. They don't have options. So no, we're not going to ban natural predators, although some vegans unfortunately might go so far as to say that, but we're not those vegans. And where does the food from the store come from? What? I don't even know what. New to this concept. What is ethical conservation? Great question, Josh. So ethical conservation would be the idea of, conservation, but doing it ethically. So for me, that would be including the idea of rights for individuals, for sentient individuals, I think that wildlife should have the same basic rights that we grant to dogs and cats. The right to not be exploited and harmed unnecessarily. So yeah, that's what I would say is ethical conservation. There also comes into, even ethical considerations for other like actual resources, right? For how we manage these resources in our modern times. So I think there's also some considerations there as far as not just like animal rights, but also like land rights, if you will. So there's a lot of good reads that I'm still working through on like land and ethics in conservation. So, but unfortunately, conservation has kind of been dominated by what I would call, funnily enough, dominator like conservation ideals, where we're kind of seeing ourselves as humans as like being supremacists, being the ones who should control everything. And I think that is inherently like really bad. And that's why we're seeing the destruction of our Earth the way it is. Cute bunny bro in chat. Good to see ya. Did not evolve from great apes. More likely, we both share a common ancestor. What? We're literally great apes, bro. Like Homo sapiens and Australopithecus and like all of our ancestors are great apes. Like I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. So far, we've had one adult request up today, and we've been at it almost an hour, a little over an hour. Learn your biology. Okay, tell me what class Homo sapiens fall into then. If not great apes, what, not genus. Genus would be Homo. Family. What family would Homo sapiens fall into? That is my biology question to you, sir. Don't pretend you are authoritative when you are freaking wrong. I just asked you a direct question though, Tropicana. So answer that, please. Damn, not telling Nikki. Oh, King, you better watch yourself, bro. You better watch yourself, King Dean. What's up, Alvin? I know more than you all. Okay, come prove it. If you're an adult, love to have a conversation with you if you think you know more than all of us. Actually, probably not, but I'd at least give you a shot. Do you not think hunting is an easy form of conservation? Kyler Ran. Interesting name, but no. Hunting is a form of exploitation. Hunting is a consumptive act that requires you to go into an ecosystem, typically a wild space, and treat wild animals as resources, right? And hunting, the idea is that you kill and you take out an animal from an ecosystem. That's not conservation. Conservation is protection, preservation, and regulation of exploitation, right? So hunting is not even related to conservation, except that it's the opposite. Like hunting is quite literally what conservation is looking to like regulate and reduce. How do I feel about culling of feral cats? I feel the same way about that as I would feel about culling humans. So we should not do it. We should not cull individuals for traits or impacts that they did not choose. Okay? So, no, we should not cull feral cats. We shouldn't cull hogs. We shouldn't cull any sort of invasive species that's sentient. That's just immoral and unnecessary, especially today, right? Like if we didn't have other options, you might could say, oh, there's some utilitarian, reason we don't have other options, so we need to do this. But yeah, the idea that just because they're like a feral cat, like causing ecological harm, if you say that ecological harm justifies like, unaliving or culling of an entire species, then we need to do some looking in the mirror. So yeah, what's up, Dingo? Good to see ya. Yeah, big on the invasive is not villain. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the amount of conversations I've tried to have on that topic of like invasive labels are not really helpful, right? Like in biology and ecology, it's not super helpful to say like it's not descriptive, right? It can be, but it also can be like introducing like vague or uncertainty almost because it's very contextual. An invasive species is a native species somewhere, and an invasive species in some certain contexts do not like fall into the proper traits to be considered invasive, right? So I mean the label just isn't really useful anymore, and I think it's often used to justify harming others. So I think that's wrong. Learn your biology, Ben. Fox Lady, I don't know why your comment got blocked, but learn your biology, Ben. We all come from yes, yes. I need to learn some more biology. In cases where there are no predators, some members of herds must be culled or many starve. Okay, so why should we not like, intervene in nonviolent ways, like with sterilization or with, maybe dividing and moving herds into different areas? There are other ways, rather than, forcefully and violently managing populations. So but yeah, I agree that where there are no natural predators or the predators have been extirpated, that does, present a potential ecological issue. But I don't think more hunting and exploitation is the answer for that. That would be saying that the solution is the same thing that got us to this point, right? Because the hunting is, in fact, what has gotten us to this point ecologically. This dominator mindset where we see, not only wildlife but other natural resources as ours for exploitation, and I think that is inherently what like ethical conservation is trying to address. I don't know. TikTok doesn't like your comments today, Fox Lady. Being too controversial with those comments. Hunting is not conservation. Fact. I don't know why TikTok does that. I don't think it's my settings either. Humans and other great apes evolved alongside each other from a common ancestor that lived several million years ago. Okay, but what does that make us? What family, if we evolved alongside other great apes, what would be the family? Maybe you're advocating for like a whole new family with just us in it, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of like the tree of life and DNA species allocation. So no, yeah, Donna, that word I actually is fine. At least I've found it to be fine. TikTok seems to be okay with me using those words, but it's also contextual. Their AI is like contextual. So what do vegans do to participate in conservation? Very good question. So vegans, just by choosing a plant-based diet, are choosing to contribute towards less exploitation of our natural resources. So a plant-based diet reduces the amount of land required. Perhaps that doesn't make sense to you, but if you think about it, we're currently raising over 90 billion land animals. Those are the farmed animals that are slaughtered every single year. 90 billion farm animals. There's like 8 billion humans, right? So we're raising 90 billion animals. All of those animals have to eat. Some of them for 6 to even a year, 6 months to 12 months, right? Like some of the larger animals that are being raised. So that's a lot of resources it takes to raise these animals. So yeah, we can definitely reduce our impacts by just choosing a plant-based diet. So I would say that's a huge thing that vegans contribute. I also think that, sorry, more comments. But yeah, hopefully that answers your question, A Folk. That was a good question, though. Do you know what the Pittman-Robertson Act is? Yes, I do. Pittman-Robertson contributed about $1.2 billion to wildlife conservation, but typically that's used for more regulations and state Department of Natural Resources, which is focused on regulating hunters. So it's not really typically investing in conservation goals, especially broad goals. But that so again, Pittman-Robertson, 1 point something billion. Just the soil and land conservation through the USDA, which is funded by public taxes, right? So vegans are paying that, non-hunters, in the public are paying that. That was $6 billion. So six times what the hunters brought in with the Pittman-Robertson Act. So the studies I've seen show that hunting funds are less than 10% of total conservation, at least in the United States. And that accounts for nonprofits as well as governmental organizations. What epistemic basis do you have to call it morally wrong to eat meat? I mean, it's morally wrong because we don't need to, and it has, a victim. And I think the victim's perspective in it is important. We haven't had any adults request up yet. I'm not convinced you are an adult either. Feeling on invasive species like the barred owl. Yeah, so I would advocate for ethical management of these species. The barred owl's species I've talked a lot about. I am completely against the cull of the barred owl. The cull of the barred owl also includes the cull of the, what do they call it? It's basically the hybrid species between the barred owl and the spotted owl. They're also going to be culling that species as well. So I'm against culling of species for ecological impacts, because I think the logical, consistent position on that would be that you'd have to start culling humans who have disproportionate ecological impacts. And I think that's completely wrong. I think judging a species based on their biology and based on their natural, necessitated actions is immoral. In the same way that I'd be against culling, feral cats that are having ecological issues, or causing ecological issues, I'm against, culling barred owls. That's awesome, Donna. Yeah, owls are such beautiful, like majestic creatures. I just don't understand why anybody would support that. But unfortunately, there are some kind of ties with the timber industry. But I think most of it is unfortunately misinformation from invasion biology perspectives that you know, kind of muddy the water as far as the ethics on culling of species. So, is it morally wrong to have a biological makeup to consume meat? Folk, so I guess you're asking, like, are obligate carnivores immoral for consuming meat? No. Obligate carnivores have an obligation to consume meat, right? Like humans don't. Humans are omnivores. That means we can thrive on either or. So since we can thrive on plants who are not sentient, do not experience harm, we should choose that option. All right. Kyla Ran really wants to come up and prove he's an adult, or they are an adult. Hopefully you are.
Like I said, I am 25. I am an adult.
Cool. Yeah, the profile picture, I was kind of like, I don't know, but awesome.
No, I have it this way because it makes my wife mad. She doesn't like this profile picture.
Cool. Well, yeah. Which topic did you want to discuss?
Definitely the hunting one, because I'm gonna be honest. You made me go because I thought I was messed up. Can I cuss on here, or do you not cuss?
That's fine with me, man.
All right, cool. I thought I was fucked up for a minute because I'm in North Carolina right now, but I'm from Northern Indiana originally, and hunting is big around there, especially in the Michigan area, and
Sure.
a lot of it has to do with lack of natural predators for, like, specifically whitetail deer. That's like I know other places in the country have their own thing, but whitetail is like a big problem where I'm from. So oh my God, what did you say that made me go look it up? You said that hunting is bad because why?
Well, I guess, like, morally it's bad because we don't need to. So in what context do you mean? Like, because it sounds like you're kind of questioning alternatives to like population management. Is that kind of what you're concerned about, or are you concerned about the like idea of exploiting wildlife and consuming them? Like,
Yeah,
which
so
part
like
would
for
you?
example, when you say that it's not needed, like the active job of hunting, which mind you, it's not a year-round thing. You can't just go out and do whatever you want. It's highly regulated via season, and
Yep.
it's entirely used for population control because as I said, they lack natural predators.
When you say entirely used for, you do recognize that there's sport hunting, there's trophy hunting. People are hunting for food sometimes for supplemental food. So it's not just for
I'm
population.
talking about, just to be clear, I hear what you're saying. You're branching out to other areas of the country. Where I'm from, it's very specifically seasonal and it's only used for concert. There, you don't get to go out and like sport hunt up here. Like it's used for conservation. People can call it sport hunting or whatever, but the entire purpose of whether you actually use the meat or you don't use the meat is entirely up to the person. But the overall goal of why it's seasonal is conservation. So you can branch it into these different paths of how people want to treat it as a sport or as something that they get to like put on their table. But the reason it's allowed at selected times of the season is for population control, which is conservation.
Um, so I guess I'm kind of confused because you're saying that there's the overpopulation, right? So that there needs to be hunting.
Correct.
Okay. So why do we only hunt in a part of the year if there's continuous overpopulation that needs to be addressed? Should we hunt like all year?
No, because animals typically, especially white-tailed deer, they have seasons. Like there's mating season, for example, and these are when the big explosions in population actually happen. And then over time, this is why it's like a year-round process because then the males and females breed, then they spawn, and then that's when you get the population uptick, which leads back into the next season, and then that's when the cull happens, if you want to be crude about it.
I'm just confused. And by the way, like I grew up hunting, so I was a hunter for like 28 years. So I'm very familiar with the how the seasons work and the regulations and like even the arguments that hunters use to try to make it sound like conservation. So what I'm asking you though is like you said overpopulation is a problem. We need to hunt to control overpopulation, right? But every year hunting has to be done, right? Because there's overpopulation. But I'm saying like if overpopulation was an issue, why do you not just hunt all year round and reduce the population?
Because you don't need to do it all year round. Like this is what I'm saying. When you here's what I think I understand your question. It's just it doesn't make a ton of sense to me because if you're doing it in an all year round scenario, you need to be very, very specific and tracking very specifically who is doing what. Like you said, you're a hunter. You're familiar with like you're only allowed a certain amount of tags. You know what I'm talking about? So if you have year round hunting, the problems become one, it's going to be more stringent on like on wildlife conservationists like think park rangers and stuff, because if they know that there's meant to be shooting during this select part of the season, it's easy to understand that. Whereas now all year round, they don't know if these people are licensed game hunters or if they're just people coming in and illegally hunting, which is something that again contributes to more of a season. But when you allow everyone to come in and do the hunting right at the end of the mating season and everything like that, it takes care of the problem, and then the problem will resurface again the next year. Whereas it's harder to regulate when you make it an all year round thing.
So but I guess what I'm trying to get at is like if there were a solution where we didn't need to continuously hunt every year, right? Like if you could do one thing, if we could like snap our fingers and the population problem was solved, would we stop hunting or would we try to like come up with another excuse to continue hunting? What do you think?
You broke up on my end. I'm so sorry. Repeat that one more time.
Yeah, all good. It's probably my internet. So if we could like snap our fingers, right, and solve the overpopulation issue, right? Like in my worldview, it'd be like reintroducing predators into rural areas, protecting those predators, not letting people, kill predators, and regaining natural mechanisms in the ecosystem for population control. So that would be what I would advocate for. But if we could do something that solved the overpopulation issue, would you say, okay, we should stop hunting?
Yeah, I mean, like personally, I'm not like a huge hunting guy. Um, I wouldn't really care. Like I view it as if people want to do it for sport or they want to do it, grass to table and stuff like that, that's fine. But my whole idea is like these things are a problem. Like people hit deers with their car. My grandpa hit a deer with his car and almost died. Like they are a problem. So I view it as much more of a conservation thing. Like I'm sure I don't know how it is in the rest of the country. I can only speak to where like I was homegrown from. Like my uncle used to hunt, my grandpa did too. As you said, you hunted. I don't know where you're from. But where I'm from, it's used specifically for conservation on a seasonal basis. I think there's other areas of the country that you can kind of do
Yeah.
whatever.
When you say so that's kind of, I guess, maybe the point we're missing here. So when you say conservation, what do you mean when you say conservation?
So, conservation has to do with a couple things. So, the majority of it is going to be population control, and population control trickles down into other issues. So, for example, if you have too many deer in one area, that's a population issue, but then that also is a detriment to the ecosystem, right? Because there's a hierarchical tree of how these things work. The predators are typically at the top, then it goes down to, you got your herbivores, and then you got the plant life, and then you got the decomposers, like think worms and stuff like that. So you have a hierarchy of things, and when you have too many of one population, it creates an imbalance in the ecosystem, and this can lead to the overall destruction of the ecosystem. This is why I don't really like your second topic of like invasive isn't exactly equivalent to villain, because there's some.
Tyler, can I ask you, like, what was my question that I asked?
I'm sorry?
What was the question I asked you? Because it didn't sound like you were answering it.
So you asked if conservation is specifically used for population control.
No, I was asking you for like your definition of conservation. Like when you say conservation, it sounds like a lot different than what I'm talking about, because when I talk about conservation, I'm talking about protection and preservation of natural resources, right? And unfortunately, animals get included as resources. But so when I talk about conservation, I'm talking about protection and preservation, right? But what it sounds like when you say conservation, it kind of sounds like you're saying like perpetuating exploitation, or like, like focusing on wildlife, right? But conservation can be about land, water, air, and wildlife, right? So like when I say conservation, I mean like the literal definition of conservation, like preservation and protection of wild resources, right? But when you say it, like what do you mean when you say it?
So, I mean, it sounds like we're meaning the same thing. The problem is that when you're factoring in animals, like how in a world like and you're a vegan, so how do you view animals as a resource when you do nothing with the animals?
We don't. We don't. We would consider them as individuals in the same way that, like, if I walk into, say, a rural area and I see a lot of feral cats, my first instinct is not to get a weapon out and start culling cats. My first instinct would be like, wow, we need to help these individuals, right? So, in the same way, like taking ethics into conservation, I would say, wow, if we have an overpopulation issue, it would be really silly for me to go and victimize these individuals, right? And essentially blame them and say, hey, you don't deserve to live because your population's too big, right? And even if you're trying to make some argument about like reducing suffering or anything, you're still intervening in a way that's causing intentional harm. And I think that's silly. That's immoral. There are other ways to manage populations. In the most extreme area where, say, predators have been wiped out, maybe we're too close to like cities and people just don't want to have predators reintroduced. You could implement sterilization programs, right? You could reduce the carrying capacity in those environments by regulating the type of land management that can happen, right? Or like isolating or fencing out huge crop fields, that would be great feed sources in the spring for deer. Or stop clear cutting practices that increase the carrying capacity for deer. There's all sorts of different nonviolent management practices that we can take. So when you're saying that conservation and hunting somehow align, what I'm hearing is that exploitation and protection are the same thing. And like that doesn't make sense to me, right? Because hunting as a form of exploitation, a consumptive act, is the opposite of protection and preservation of resources, right? Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do. So I heard you say you responded to another comment after I had given my first question, which was like, how do you not think that hunting is a form of conservation. And I saw your little recommendation about sterilization. I went through and I looked up a couple things real fast. And the funny thing about sterilization that I found is, one, animal rights groups argue back and forth on if it's a good idea anyway. And then there have been several studies that pose that it probably wouldn't do anything anyway, because the sterilization itself is, one, expensive. We now have to abduct these individuals and then surgically remove them. Oh, really?
No,
You don't think so?
no.
So the
That's
experts are
correct.
what's saying that. So you go ahead and tell me how it would actually be done.
Oh yeah, because it looks like you're looking at like invasive procedures, like you know, like literally giving surgery to animals, but that's not the sterilization I'm talking about. There are medical sterilization options that can be administered either in blow darts for specific individuals or in feed. There's actually feed being tested over the last 4 years. So there's studies on my website. Again, like if you want to go check out the resources, I believe it's in the hunting and agriculture document. There's specific studies on some of these different sterilization options and where they're most effective, where they're not super effective. But the great thing is that where they're effective are the areas where predators, you know, reintroduction might not make sense, right? Like in suburbs and in urban areas, right? Like sterilization options in the same way we do, you know, TNR, trap, neuter, and release for stray cats. You could also be doing that for other animals that are causing, you know, issues for humans, and that would not require like treating them as a resource or like, you know, expending their life and taking their entire life away from them. You know, so in my position as somebody who cares about the ethics, who cares about the individuals who are being harmed, obviously I would choose, you know, the option that doesn't require taking their life away and harming them, right?
Okay, so here's the problem is, one, if you're recommending something like sterilized feed, for example, how do you regulate that? How do you, one, make sure an efficient amount of deer that are specifically going to be coming in and eating that are going to be getting that per year? How do you regulate that? Because that isn't like a fix all. That's going to be something that has to be repeated over and over and over again on a yearly basis, similar to hunting. And at the same time, it's going to have to be arguably put under a microscope in order to actually be effective. So how do you work that in?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say the same way we figure out hunting, right? Like if we can spend at state levels, there's state funding too, not just the federal funding from the Pittman-Robertson Act, but we're spending like billions of dollars every year to regulate hunting, right? So if we can do that, why would we regulate hunting if it's unnecessary? It's causing ecological harm. It's encouraging people to see sentient individuals as resources. Why would the public, who typically is against unnecessary harm, you know, especially in the case of like cats, everybody would advocate against culling cats. They would say TNR, you know, or find them homes. In that same way, we can do the same thing for wildlife, right? It's not a matter of like, how are we going to do this? It's a matter of like, we need to conceptualize these ideas, right? That seeing sentient individuals as resources, that's immoral. That's just a line where it's immoral, because treating them as expendable, like chess pieces, you know, in some game to like manage nature, is super immoral. It's not okay to do that. So yeah, I think, you know, this problem of like how would we do it is that we figure all sorts of things out. You know, like we build like islands in the desert. Like we can figure out how to like manage population through sterilization programs. Like the U.S. Senate just voted in the last few months to spend like I think it was $1.4 billion over the next 5 years going out and intentionally shooting and killing barred owls. Like that's a lot of money. That's a lot of resources being devoted to killing one species, right? Like there's all sorts of funding, and if we get people to understand the options that, hey, you know, we don't have to go out and cull animals. We could do these humane options that doesn't involve treating them as, you know, expendable like resources. I think most people would be in support of that. So it's just more a matter of like getting public support for those options more than anything.
So you threw out or quite a few things there, but my biggest problem is like you threw out like initially a dollar amount about how hunting is and how expensive we do to regulate it and everything like that. And that's not quite what I asked you. Like, the problem is that when you're talking about doing, say, sterilized feed that comes out and it's got chemicals in them that go through and retroactively sterilize the deer, the reason that hunting is regulated and massively done across the country, and honestly in some places across the world, is because it's easy and it's effective. You go in, you give a bunch of people a bunch of tags, they go out and they do their thing, and then the population is controlled. Whereas what you're talking about, the amount of resources and micromanagement that we would need to delegate to make sure that we place a perfect amount. We can't go under because then the population continues to grow, and we can't go over because we don't want the population to dip under an unhealthy number. We have to get a perfect amount of what we can do for sterilized feed. We then need to have enough deer come and eat the feed between both male and female to make sure, and it's got to be equal. We can't have all the males getting sterilized and none of the females. So now we have to track exactly which deer are going to be doing it. And then we're essentially going to be needing to regulate all of these people to go out and tag the deer too. You need to have like a visual notification so we can track, okay, this deer is sterilized, because this is what's going to be regulating how we track how many out of the population are now sterile and no longer going to produce. You're talking about an insurmountable job and interfering with an ecosystem at a level that I don't think is healthy. I don't know.
It's just weird, like hearing you say that. It really makes me think like you maybe don't have experience. Like obviously you don't have a clear understanding of how these like sterilization methods work, based on some of the things you said. So that might be a good space for you to do some more research and just see like the different options that are available. But
I'm going off your suggestion though, which was the feed. Like, can you explain to me clearly and concisely how your plan would work out for feed?
Yeah, so like it depends on the medication that's being administered, because some target, male fertility, some target female fertility. So it's not as simple as like just being like, oh, we have to manage every single one that gets the feed. But what you're describing is also like already happening for hunting, right? Like we're already spending all of that money to do all of that tracking you're talking about as far as like population levels. We're already doing it to figure out how many tags to issue every single year. Like, I mean, we already do that. That's why I'm confused. It seems like, one, you need to understand, to make these arguments you're trying to make, you need to understand the sterilization options, right? And I'm simply providing you that there are options available. There are humane options available that have studies, right? And I pointed you to my website where I have the studies linked, right? So you need to do some more research there before we like continue down this argument path. But secondly, like it's already happening for hunters. Like it's already being tracked. All of those resources you're talking about and all of the crazy complexity, it's already being done by state biologists. That's math, that's statistics, that's biology. Like they already do that kind of tracking. So it seems like you're trying to make it a big issue when I'm saying like it's a moral imperative that we look for alternatives. And you're kind of like saying, well, oh, it might be too complicated, or how would you solve this? How would you exactly solve it? That's not up to me. It doesn't matter. Like if there are alternatives, right, than killing individuals, we should choose those alternatives. Would you not agree?
So no, I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. I understand what you're saying about hunting, but ultimately hunting is a simple mathematical equation. You have population number, you have this needs to be decreased to reach X population number, you hand X amount of hunters X amount of tags to purposely decrease that, and then when the hunters execute the 1-to-1, I see deer, I take deer out, you're at the population. With the feed option that you're talking about, you have to evenly disperse this feed. And you can only have...
Tyler, you're speculating. You know nothing about the administration. Did you look at those studies already that I mentioned on my website?
No, but I'm telling you that when I look at things like the Wildlife Society Bulletin that have cited these same studies about taking care of and sterilizing these animals, they're posing the exact opposite of what you're saying. So we're having conflicting studies. So what I'm posing to you right now is that you're talking about not a 1-to-1. You're not talking about...
Provide the study. Let me see the study. I'll pull it up. Like I provided you studies and you clearly didn't pull any of them up. But now you're saying you cited some study. Let me see the study. I'll look it up right now.
It's from the Wildlife Society. Give me a second. So WSB study. Let me go through and let me get the actual article name.
Wildlife Society, isn't that like a nonprofit? It's not like a scientific organization, right? Yeah, it's it's that's not a scientific source.
They're just they're the source reporting on the scientific study. Like
Okay.
this is let me see if
So,
I can find you where the original thing comes from.
yeah, if there's an actual study link, that's what I would like to see, because I mean normally the Wilderness Society is pretty solid, but I know they do support hunting and conservation. So. But yeah, I mean everything you're bringing up now is like speculation about how sterilization would be administered, and there's like multiple different options for that, right? So like you would have to go through all of the different options available and tell me like all the different challenges for each one, and that's just silly. Like it's like there are alternatives. Those are, not causing direct harm and suffering. Those are morally preferential, right?
Okay. The issue that I'm posing to you, though, is that overall, what you're allocating for here, based on, let's not just say the feed one, let's say it's like you go and blow dart the people, as you said, you blow dart the sterilization drugs into the animal. All of these options, what you're allocating for here is a redistribution of resources that were originally allocated for hunting that need to now be completely reframed to be doing what I'm talking about, which is essentially the nuance of it, the exact proportion of feed, the exact right number of individuals consuming enough feed, these type of things. All of these nuances need to be researched and reallocated. And the proposed reason is I don't like that we kill these animals. Do you think this is on the top chopping block for, let's say, more than 30% of anybody in any state? Like, do you think this is in their top 20 or 30 things that they want to get done? Like, you're not providing to me a sufficient argument on why we should be reallocating these resources to do what could, in your world, you're saying I'm speculating on, you're speculating could be a good alternative to something that's already essentially tried and true. It works every year. That's why we continue doing it.
I honestly like don't even know what to say to that. That's wild, man. Like, so I cited studies. Like, I'll literally pull them up and give you the title if going to my website is too difficult. But these studies show effective use of these different sterilization options. So those are proven through scientific studies to be effective, right, for controlling overpopulation and for reducing population numbers. Now, your argument thus far has been hand waving and speculation about how you would administer these sterilization options. Now, again, I reference those studies that I just referenced, saying those show you the different ways it can be effective in different areas where it's more challenging, right, based on context. And you're still saying the same argument of how would you do this? How would you reallocate funding? That's not the
That's
argument.
not at all what I just did. What I did is I accepted your studies. I haven't reviewed them. I'll go, is it in your profile that you have your website or whatever? Okay,
Yep.
cool. After I get off here with you, I'll click on and I'll go through and I'll read what I am at now after accepting your studies as a valid thing. I'm saying, okay, what you're advocating for now is the decontinuation of hunting because you don't want any more hunting, right? That's your goal?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you're allocating for the discontinuation of hunting and the reallocation of those resources that were originally used for hunting conservation to these new methods, correct?
I guess you could say that, but that's a problem, right? So hunting, the funding that comes from hunting is taxes on hunting, right? So we're talking about now like how we would fund these different conservation things, and again, that's irrelevant to the whole discussion, right? That's like saying, oh, like a few more dollars or something would be too difficult for us to do, so therefore the whole argument is out. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. We can figure out how we're funding. We're already funding 90% of conservation outside of hunting sources, right? So like how we fund this is irrelevant. So I don't know why you're talking about how we decrease hunting and move towards this. All I'm presenting is that there are alternatives to killing, right, to culling that do not involve suffering and harm. And you're saying you're making all of these excuses because you're speculating about how difficult it could be. All that matters in this discussion right now is that there are alternatives to killing animals for population control. Do you not agree?
Okay, no, I see what you're saying, but I don't like how you're framing what because again, I'm not talking about how we're going to do it. Now I'm talking about the realistic why. Because you're talking about all of these numbers related to hunting and getting taxes on hunting and how we fund conservation. Because ultimately, I think the majority of America thinks we should have natural parks. I don't think every little square inch of land should be brick and concrete and skyscrapers. I think people like being able to go to Yellowstone or the Everglades. I think this is what you're talking about when you say we already fund conservation to this amount. Correct. There is also, in the offside of it, a large conglomerate of people that do enjoy hunting, whether it be as like a sport, which you, I'm sure, heavily disagree with, or something that they do as more of a lifestyle choice. They like having that grass to table type aesthetic and being able to do that. You're talking about now going outside of that and allocating for more money to conservation, because now it's not going to be money made by taxes on hunting. Now it's going to be we as people need to allocate for these additional things to go out and administer to the deer populations. And my question to you is the why. Why should we be doing this and reallocating, cutting all of these people out of either a sport, a hobby, whatever they want to call it, to do these alternative methods when we already have something that's working? Why do we need to go alternative when people are happy doing the one that's working?
So one, it's not working, and two, because it's wrong. It causes a victim, right? And it's unnecessary. So because it's unnecessary and it causes a victim, that makes it immoral. And two, there are alternatives, so that's why.
Okay, when you say it's not working, what do you mean by it's not working?
So your whole argument earlier was that, oh, every year we need to have a deer season to control overpopulation, right? But then the next year, what do? We have a deer season to control the overpopulation, right? And then the next year, what's happening? Oh, we've got an overpopulation, so we gotta hunt again. So what you're describing is not solving the issue; it's perpetuating the issue, right?
I would never classify that as that, because what you're talking about is this is like, I would relate it to cutting your grass, for example. You have to cut your grass every couple weeks because you want to have grass, but you don't want to have an overgrown lawn. The alternative fix all solution is you rip up all the grass out of your yard and you put astroturf down that looks like grass, so you never have to cut it. And that's the fix all solution. But people don't operate like that. With nature, things grow, populations grow, grass grows. So saying that this doesn't fix the problem, I would argue that's not entirely true. We would see our ecosystems absolutely collapsing if this didn't work. You're saying it's perpetuating a problem. I'm saying it's just a consistent year over year cycle that needs to be repeated, which would go in the exact same direction as anything you want to do with sterilization. This isn't something that you could just do, one time forever. You're going to need to repeat this process every couple of years at minimum because of how deers are going to be reproducing and how populations explode with no natural predators.
What's the difference besides sterilization not causing direct harm, right? What is the difference if we do sterilization every single year, or we go out and intentionally harm and exploit others every single year? What is the difference? If both, let's say both of
you
those.
Broke. Hey, I'm sorry to stop you. You broke up on the first part of your question. I wanted to hear it. I'm sorry.
Cool. No, all good. So if both options, right, sterilization and hunting, lead to the same results, right, where every single year we need to keep doing that option to control the population, right? Are you with me?
Yeah, I heard you.
Right. So each option has the same result. Every single year, we've got to continue that option, right? That behavior. So one is continuing direct harm and exploitation of others. One is not. So which one is the moral choice to perpetuate year after year?
When you say moral, though, you're applying a moral value to these deer that I could say, I don't morally value deer. Like if I say that, how do you communicate with me now?
I would say you're being irrational.
So when you say I'm being irrational, if I asserted to you that in an actual natural situation where we don't have these large cities and everything so close to these areas and we can have a healthy population of predators, these deer are arguably going to be experiencing more pain in a natural scenario based on a coyote ripping them apart or this, that, the other, as it being opposed to like the end of a 30-aught buck round, right?
Okay, so
So
if you were to have complete control, let's say like you got to choose the outcomes for individuals, and you saw somebody born into, let's say, like a lower income area, the chances that they're going to be involved in crime or have a life of suffering is very high. Do you have a moral obligation to unalive that person to reduce their suffering?
it's a person?
Sure. A person
No,
or
excuse me.
okay.
You said, do I or do I not have a moral obligation?
Do you have a moral obligation to unalive a human because they're most likely going to suffer?
It's a weird question. I would, in a preferred world where I can control everything, I would rather just fix the situation than hurt a person. Like that would be ideal to me.
Cool. Okay. So what if it was a dog? So the individual subject here is a dog. They're born into a condition, let's say on the streets. You could choose to adopt them and care for them and provide them medical care, or you could just unalive them and reduce their suffering. They'll never suffer again. Which is the best option for that individual?
Is this hurting me financially?
Nope.
Well, if it's not hurting me, then yeah, I'd take the dog.
Okay. So in the same context, if we replace the dog with deer, right? Why all of a sudden would you choose to be like, well, let's harm the deer and use their body parts?
So what is the stipulation with the deer? Because you're comparing a dog being on the street and this, that, the other, whereas the deer is in its natural habitat. So what's the confliction here?
Well, your argument is that you think culling or hunting animals is justified because overpopulation leads to suffering, right? So you're saying that you're being moral by unaliving someone you speculate could suffer, right?
So what I would be arguing is if I could fix it in the same way as the deer, is that I would just naturally put in the appropriate hierarchy of predator, prey, and then fauna into the thing. That's how I would ideally do it, which in your world still doesn't, well, I don't know if it works or not. Do you care if deer get like mauled to pieces by a coyote, or would you be against that?
I don't think that moral patients, such as animals who don't have choices and who are obligate carnivores, I don't think they're acting immorally by being predators. No,
Okay.
that's no.
If we had, let's say we had the alternative solution of it's now way too many predators, would you be in favor of hunting predators to save deer or no?
Do you think that's a ecological reality that there's an overpopulation of predators?
There have absolutely been places where there have been overpopulation in predators, yes. And
Can
we
you give
have
me
hunted said predators.
can you give me one example that's not like feline, like cats?
Let me go ahead and look it up.
I feel like, man, you're just speculating, man. It's just like the whether we would like manage predator populations is irrelevant. Even as a vegan, if let's say there was some ecological reality where there's an overpopulation of predators, I still wouldn't advocate for culling them. Like that's never been my position, right? Like there's sterilization options, there's all sorts of different options that we have. Why would we advocate for harming them? Like that's been my entire I've been logically consistent, this entire time against culling individuals for their ecological impacts. And you're trying to justify for some reason we wouldn't do it to a human because they might suffer, right, from being on the streets or whatever. A dog, being born into a situation where they might have suffering, you didn't want to kill the dog. But then when we put the deer into a situation where they might be in an overpopulation and they might have starvation or other suffering, all of a sudden you're advocating for treating them as a resource, unaliving them and consuming their bodies. That's where I'm lost. Like that to
So
me is
I hear what you're saying. So in the instance of the deer, for example, like the dog, I apply a different moral value to because humans and dogs have functioned like independently of one another and then codependently of one another throughout human history, right? We have
yeah.
used them for hunting. We've used them for a multitude of other things. Hell, some people use them now for like emotional support animals and stuff. Like we have this relation with dogs.
Can I ask you about this value? Because, like, to me, I don't think it's like, yes, I believe like relational value is important, right? In the same way that I care about like my close family or people I know more than like a stranger, right? Like, sure,
Yeah,
relational
sure,
value is
sure, sure.
important. But when we're talking about moral context, we care about victims, right? Like, who is being harmed. I care about dogs the same way I care about deer, the same way I care about humans in their capacity to suffer, right? Because they are all agents or patients, excuse me, moral patients who we get to inflict our morals upon to, right? Like they are having an experience. That's what I care about. But you're making an argument that because you're closer to a dog, you would treat a dog better than some other individual that has equal capacity to suffer, and that's inconsistent. I don't think that's rational.
So here's kind of my conundrum here is like as a I don't know your entire stance. I just know that you are a vegan, right? Do you put humans and animals on like the same moral pedestal? Are these the same thing to you?
Same thing. I mean, I recognize species different,
Well,
but
obviously,
I
yeah.
think yeah, but I think as far as moral consideration, I think the capacity to suffer is like my baseline. If you are sentient and have the capacity for suffering and experience, and a typical sentient experience, right, which is a binary trait, you're either sentient or you're not. If you have sentience, the capacity to deploy sentience, then you have moral consideration in my book. I think that's logically consistent, and I think that values the experience of the individual who can be a victim. And that's why I think, yeah, it's immoral to consider, deer somebody that you could just unalive or treat as a resource, or like determine their life because you think they might suffer. Like you wouldn't do that in any other context where you recognize the victim. You would never do that.
So my what kind of where I'm like posing this question because I see what you're saying about moral consideration and about like articulating sentience. Like if a being can be sentient, it is therefore of moral consideration. Like if I was to pose this question, like there's a human or there's a deer, and you need to pick which one lives and which one then suffers for the next 18 hours and then passes away, which one are you going to pick? Wouldn't for you technically it would be a toss up because they're both of equal moral consideration?
Potentially, I mean, but at the same time, I do value the human experience more because I have a bias. But as long as that human's like not Smittler or some horrible person, I have no reason to choose one or the other. Both have the capacity for suffering, but because I'm a human and I might have a bias towards a human, they might be my first choice, right? But I would still value them both equally. I would say that that's like inherently a amoral situation to be in when you're choosing one sentient individual over another. There's no right choice. I don't think there is. But by my moral judgment, I would say it's equal toss up. But at the same time, I recognize that I'm a human. I have bias. I would choose my family member over some other person. So yeah, I would probably choose a human over like some other animal, right? So I don't think that's inconsistent in my worldview.
I see what you're saying about the bias. I'm losing it a little bit because like for me, like I understand what you're saying when you make the equivocation to a family member over a stranger. I don't think any person would ever, diss you for picking your mom over some dude from a different country. Like I totally get it. I my confusion falls in where you're saying that we are both of the same moral consideration. So when you're talking about let's say a stranger versus a deer, these people hypothetically both mean nothing to you, so I am confused on how you're valuing the human experience over the deer's natural experience. You see what I'm saying?
But see, you're misrepresenting my point because I told you that I don't value like morally they're at a baseline. So I told you it's a immoral or amoral situation. Like there is no right choice from my perspective, right? But I can still say that I would choose the human because of my bias. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I mean, like yeah, there's still the sentient baseline. And when you give like a either or question, right? Like that's not the case with any of these decisions we're talking about, right? Like it's not a case whether we either cull the animals or make some other very specific choice. Like there are multiple different choices we have when it comes to making ethical decisions, right?
Totally. So here's here's where I'm sort of losing you, right? Because ultimately, as people, like you agree that there's flawed people. You mentioned Smitler earlier. There's absolutely flawed people in the world, and this, that, the other. We have people who break laws, commit crimes, this, that, the other. My confusion is that at a baseline, I feel like all humans within certain countries operate differently than one another. But let's just take the America, right? The USA. We all operate under the same like central social contract. We have laws that we follow, which is what you don't agree that we have a social contract of like laws and what you should
I
do and not
think
do.
what I'm hearing you go into sounds like maybe ableism, where we're saying like if you're able to understand our like social interactions or something that gives you moral value.
I I don't know if I understood you. Say again.
Sorry, I should have let you finish. You go ahead and express your point because I maybe preemptively jumped that.
Yeah, I might be doing what you're doing. I just didn't know if I understand what you were saying. Like
I think you
my
are. I
point
think
is that
you are.
yeah. So my thing here is that as a society, we kind of have people who operate under, like, for example, you don't murder somebody. That's a bad thing to do. We don't do that. If you do that, then you are now imprisoned. You lose some of your obligated rights. And then personally, I'd be down for a little bit of reformism. I think we should do more like Norway, Sweden, where you get like counseling and psychologists and therapists. In a perfect world, I would fix that. Let's say that happens, right? So we rehabilitate the person instead of just imprison them. We rehabilitate the person and then we bump them back into society X amount of time later, right? In the animal kingdom, for example, we don't necessarily have that, but we have stipulations. So, for example, we own dogs, even if we don't necessarily get a utility out of them, like in the past we've used them for hunting. However, if there's ever a time that that dog steps out of the societal barrier, so let's say your dog breaks out of your backyard, goes into the neighbor's backyard, and bites their kid, like scars their arm all up, they need surgery, this, that, the other. By mandate, that dog is now to be put down, essentially given like the death penalty to a human person given a similar situation, right? Do you think that we should put the same level of consideration of like extrapolating resources now to things that we don't have any utility for, like dogs, where we at least get some type of emotional attachment with them? We should extrapolate this outward to like woodland creatures like bears and deer and these other things. Like where does your branching outward come from? That's more of what I'm asking.
I definitely didn't follow with the like dog part. I think that confused me. Can
So
you
the dog,
restate your question maybe?
yeah, the dog thing is easy. So we as people, at least in America, not in China, but in America, we own dogs because we see some level of utility in them. Some people use them to train and do even little hunting or whatever. Other people just get an emotional attachment. You would agree with that, right? People love their dogs.
I think the part that's tripping me up is like I don't see it as owning a dog. Like I rescue animals and they're my companions, so I don't see it as like a ownership in the same way like if I had a kid, I wouldn't say like I own them as like property.
No,
Um,
sure. Like when I say owning a dog, like if someone asks me whose dog is that, I'd be like, it's my dog. Like I'm
Yeah, but,
taking,
but
I
you were saying that like humans only have them for some utility, and I don't like. I guess if you say like companionship and being a friend is like a utility, I guess I could agree with you then.
Yeah, that's more of what I meant. Is like we gain something from them. They aren't just this like inanimate thing. So we have accepted that this is like the norm, and we let them fall into a lot of things. We still have laws and regulations like leash laws and stuff. But the point that I was
Yeah,
making is that if a human goes outside of our societal contract and murders somebody, they're now imprisoned. In the
yeah.
same way that a dog, if it would break out of your backyard and go into your neighbors and let's say bite their kid's arm up, scar their arm up, they need surgery, this, that, the other. By state mandate, that dog is now to be confiscated and put down. It's the same as giving the death penalty to a person. Do you think that is moral or immoral?
I would say that's immoral because the dog is not like making a choice to do that. And in the same way you were talking about like extending, like therapy and rehabilitation to humans, I think we should extend that to animals. So of course I would say it's immoral to put a dog down that bit somebody. Like that's, yeah, of course.
So I'm losing you a little bit there because I don't.
Let's say somebody who doesn't understand laws or morality. Maybe they can't communicate well. They're not good socially. And let's say they have like other disabilities, like cognitive disabilities. If that person harms somebody, would that person receive the same, punishment in your ideal worldview as somebody who like did the harmful act, like intentionally knowing the consequences? Would that be equal kind of punishment in your worldview?
I might have lost you completely there. I don't know if I understood. What was this person to me?
So this person, let's say they can't understand the impacts of their actions. So like the harm they're doing to somebody else, they don't understand they're doing the harm, right? And so they
Okay.
don't, maybe they have a cognitive impairment or, some kind of other issue that makes it to where they can't understand what they're doing, right? And let's say that person does some harmful act and let's say unalive somebody. Would you treat that person the same as like somebody who intentionally, like knowingly harmed and unalive somebody?
No. We like in our legal framework, those people are typically institutionalized because they're still people, but they're also like insane. The insanity thing is like the easiest way of like how you would legally frame that, and then they're just institutionalized for the rest of their lives.
Sure, and you would agree that because they didn't understand or recognize their impacts, that they shouldn't be held accountable necessarily to the same degree as somebody who knew their impacts and chose to cause that harm anyway, right?
Yeah, sure.
Sure. So the same applies to animals. Like animals or non-human animals like dogs, cats, any other, non-human species does not understand the impacts, right? Like they may be able to empathize with others to some degree, like recognizing when harm is happening, but they don't have choices. They don't understand morals, right? So why would we inflict our moral code onto another? That's inconsistent. They don't understand these implications of their actions, right? So why would we punish them?
So I think the key distinction is that when you're talking about like people who take the insane thing, these are not like they're not like fawn meadows that these people go to. Like the insane asylums are like some of they used to be even worse, but still to this day, they're some of the darkest places of like the American prison system. They are constantly on round the clock medication. The living conditions are awful, this, that, the other. Are you advocating that if a dog were to do kind of what you're talking about with this person that can't understand laws or anything, we should have like an insane asylum for dogs? Is that what you mean?
I mean, a rehab center, sure. Like, I feel like we're getting really far off, the whole ethical situation of hunting. But I'm totally down to keep going down this route. But let's say I rescued a dog who had been forced and conditioned from, their birth as a puppy to for dog fighting. All they knew their entire life was dog fighting. Every time they saw another dog, they got in a fight and were trying to, kill the dog, right? If I rescue this dog and I try to put them into rehab and I try to, improve their life to where they don't have these violent reactions, but they still go out and harm somebody, did the dog knowingly and like intentionally go out and cause harm?
Broke up on that last sentence. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
Did the dog knowingly with intention go out and cause harm and get in a dog fight?
I'm struggling with your term of knowing because dogs and humans don't think at the same capacity. So I don't know if I know what you mean. Like, I would argue that it's almost like an acting on a nature thing based on how they've been conditioned, and
Sure.
as opposed to thinking.
And so you're advocating for judging and punishing them based on their actions that are natural or conditioned within them.
No. So what I'm arguing on in this sense is like this is why like I don't know how you stand on it, but I believe in the death penalty. I believe that there are people that are irredeemable, like Smittler, for example. I don't think he should get to live out the rest of his days in either a cushy or not cushy prison system. I don't care. I think that that is an irredeemable person that you can't fix. There's no rehabilitation to be had. And it's kind of the same with an always aggressive dog. This is why we just put them down. We don't let them live in little asylums or whatever that we fund and take care of. If a dog is permanently aggressive and there's no fixing it, you can't do anything with that dog. So why should we as people allocate resources to that dog now?
because they're a sentient individual who didn't choose to be born, and you're inflicting and choosing to harm them because of choices they did not make. That's why.
When you say choices that they did not make, though, like this is what I'm
Yeah,
struggling with, because
that's wrong. That was wrong language. You're right. Behaviors that they did not choose.
behaviors they did not choose. Like I understand what you're saying, but this is, again, I'm applying the same standard of what I'm speaking about to humans, for example, where I think you can be an irredeemable human and there's no chance in saving you. So why should we as society look at some of the worst of us and continue to allocate resources outside of our pockets, tax pockets, whatever, to fund prison systems to then allow these people to live out the rest of their days? Why should we allow that?
I'm still like waiting for us to rope this back into why hunting is somehow conservation. And
You
like
just told me you were
we
down
went
to
back
keep
to,
running it down, so
no,
I'm just
no, no,
chatting.
no. We're way off of the topic because so far it seems like you've misunderstood intentionality. You misunderstood like moral patience and how we as moral agents inflict our morals upon moral patients. And it also seems like you're like avoiding the accountability of like this intentional harm when we do have alternatives. So like if maybe we can like kind of reset and we can say again, so we've talked about overpopulation for the better part of like a half an hour or more. Do you still feel like we haven't settled the idea of overpopulation?
I mean, what do you mean by settled? I don't know. My thing is, like, I see a system that is functioning, and you see a system that could also function. We just need to do it. And my argument is essentially, I don't see a reason to. But your moral quandary is that we ought to, based on you feel it's right, but I don't feel it's right. Do you see what I'm saying? So we're having a
It's
little bit
not
of
a
an impasse.
feeling. It's not a feeling. I articulated to you already why, right? Because these are sentient individuals capable of suffering and having an experience. That's why when we have the option between killing or culling, and treating them as a resource, or sterilizing or managing their habitat, or any of the many other nonviolent, non-interventionist conservation methods we have, that's the moral question, right? There is someone suffering. One creates a victim, one does not, right? And you're so far, we spent all that time talking about overpopulation for you to still kind of arrive at this point where you're saying that even though there's a victim and even though there are potential alternatives that you still need to research, and that's fair, even though there might be alternatives, I still think that this system that we've been participating in that causes victims is somehow conservation.
Okay, but no, because when you're saying that it is a moral quandary, morals are already a feeling. Morals are not like divine intervent or divine to you.
A feeling.
Yes, quite literally. That's
Morals
entirely what more.
are. Can you like explain that to me? Like rationalize to me how morals are a feeling.
So
That's
morals are
fair. That's
absolutely a
fair.
feeling. Like, for example, if you have a person who lacks empathy, the ability to put themselves in another person's shoes and see the way that their life is, this person is going to have no moral value of anybody other than themselves. This is how narcissists form, right?
Do
So,
you have empathy? Do you have empathy?
to degrees, yes, there's definitely pieces and places that I cut off,
Okay,
just like any other person.
let's talk about you and me then. Let's not talk about, other people who might lack empathy. You and I are capable of empathizing. We can recognize that if we were a deer, we would not accept somebody saying, "Oh, you might starve next spring, so you gotta die." Like we wouldn't accept that in the deer's position, right? Like you can agree with that.
Well, see, but this is the thing, though, is that having empathy, the closer that you get, the easier it is to understand. So people have a frustration with empathy sometimes, seeing outside of their households, sometimes outside of their local communities, and stretching it further and further and further once you get to states, countries, this, that, the other, right? The more that you know and the more that you understand another person is how you empathize. I don't know how to empathize with being a deer or how to empathize with being a frog. I don't know what they think about. They don't
So,
think the same way or
hold on,
operate the
hold on.
same. Go ahead.
So are you saying that like let's say like a different person, I'm don't want to assume like you're like, you know, situation or whatever, but let's say some other person who has a completely different life than you, completely different experiences, you know, maybe they're blind. Let's say they're blind. They cannot see. Can you empathize with them?
With a blind person? I mean, I'd like to think so. I don't
Okay.
know if I don't know if I would be honest in saying I could empathize with
No,
that.
that's fair. That's fair. But I would say that even though I've never been blind, I could empathize and I could try to put myself in somebody else's shoes, right? And try to understand what they might be experiencing, right? Even though I've had different experiences, even though I've got a different physical, you know, system or whatever, I can still empathize with this individual, even though they're different, right? Because we're both sentient. We both have an experience. We both suffer. We both experience joy, right? Like there are all these shared commonalities. Now let's move to a dog. When a dog, let's say, is in pain, somebody accidentally steps on their tail. Can you empathize with that dog? Do you feel bad for the dog?
Yes, but so
That's
here's
empathy.
my if you're going to
That's
relate
empathy.
this to feelings though, technically you as a person don't need
Hold
your
on, hold on, hold on,
Okay, go
hold on,
ahead.
hold on, hold on. You said if we're going to relate this to feeling, are you saying empathy is not related to
No, no,
feeling?
no, no. You cut me out just before I was about to say it. When I was saying relate this to feeling, so when you're talking about like a dog getting its tail stepped on, I should have used the word stimuli. That would have been a better word. As it like feeling, I meant like physical touch, right? Like physical touch and responding to stimuli is technically something that you can do with just your brain stem. That isn't something that you need an entire brain to process. You can react to basic stimuli with just your brain stem, and at that point, you're not a person. You're just like a body, right? So this is like when you gave the example of the blind person, I was with you, but the reason that I was with you while not being able to like be honestly saying I can empathize with it is that I know what it's like to be a person. I'm 25. I can understand what it's like to be a 13-year-old boy because I was that person at one point. I can't really
Can I
empathize
ask
with a
you a very
13-year-old girl, but I can still
specific,
empathize with what it's like to be a person.
can I ask you a very specific question to get us back on track? Now, I asked you specifically about a dog getting their tail stepped on, and you said, "Yeah, I would feel what that dog is experiencing." Right? So, like, the shared experience here is not getting our canine tail stepped on. That's not the shared experience that we're empathizing with. We're empathizing with pain, right? Is
Hmm.
that not the empathy that we're feeling? Like we're recognizing pain in another species?
Yes.
Okay. So why can we not recognize pain in a deer or a bear or a fish? Why could we not recognize or try to empathize with these individuals?
So when we're talking about like I won't go to bear or fish or anything. I'll just stay on deer because that's kind of what we're talking about. When we're talking about deer, it's not just like for example, I'll meet you in the middle here. If I was in a room with a deer and it's completely dark in there, I can't see, and I have knives for hands, and I walk into the deer by accident in the dark, and I stab it. I'm gonna feel bad because I'm gonna be like, dude, I just hurt this deer for no reason. What's wrong with me? You know,
That's not empathy.
that's because I just randomly inflicted pain on this deer. Whereas in the context of hunting and conservation, we have to make a short term pain on the deer to prevent the entire rest of the ecosystem from having a situation. Does that make sense? Like all of these things are cost benefit. It's not just like this stagnant area of how do we consider this one individual thing in one random circumstance.
No, because like what you've just described is speculation. You're literally making the same argument that we got frustrated on in the beginning. You're saying that, you know, you're speculating that because of this population thing, there's going to be individual suffering. And like there's no other option but cause harm to individuals.
Okay, no,
Like,
I'm gonna have to give you a harsh disagreement right there. It is not speculation that an overpopulation of deer would one lead to overall starvation due to lack of food for the deer, and then two, it would disseminate the local fauna, which would be unhealthy for the rest of the forest ecosystem. This is the bugs, this is the other animals like squirrels, birds, any of these other things that live in the area. all of these things are going to suffer on top of the deer now experiencing a famine. That's not speculation. That's basic ecological understanding.
Yeah, I think the problem is that there's no ecosystem that you're describing that works like this, where hunting is like the sole thing and only focused on prey species. The problem is that hunting is still focused on predators as well. So the argument you're making doesn't even hold up to the basic like licensing and tag system, that each state has. I would love to know if there's any specific states or areas that specifically what you're describing, where hunting is solely used for overpopulation, right? Like only that was your opening argument, is that hunting is overpopulation control, which is we
I
talked about.
did caveat that real fast. I did caveat that I'm sure there are other places that do their own thing. I was speaking from where I was from, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I know of two types of hunting that are used in northern Indiana and Michigan, where I'm locally from. One of them is conservation hunting, and then the other one isn't really hunting. But for example, in Indiana, there's a lot of farms. You're allowed to shoot and kill coyotes if they come on your property, because they're going to be trying to eat the cows that you herd and the chickens and stuff like that.
I just looked it up. Indiana predator hunting primarily targets coyotes, foxes, raccoons, and bobcats per Indiana DNR. So your state is still issuing tags and allowing the hunting. Most likely with coyotes is probably unlimited hunting. There's probably no tags. That's how it is in my state here in South Carolina. But your state is still targeting predators. So if your state was focused on overpopulation, and overpopulation was the main goal we were trying to solve, why would they be targeting predators who are doing that naturally?
Because
why would that be a problem?
Because you have to look at predator spawn rates. So, for example, coyotes have a ridiculous... Let me look it up. Coyotes have a ridiculous spawn rate. Those motherfuckers repopulate like crazy.
Yeah, the problem with that argument is that coyotes are compensatory reproducers. So when you eliminate the majority of coyotes in an area, they reproduce even more so in that area. So the hunting is making, not even helping with that issue that you're talking about. So
But still, what you're talking about is population control, which is conservation. That's what I literally related to you. Now you're just moving it from deer away to what I posed to you earlier, which was what happens if there's too many predators? And you said, well, where has that ever happened? We're not just going out and killing random coyotes for whatever reasons. It's got to do with they have a ridiculous amount of population.
No, they literally go out and kill coyotes for any reason. Like I've participated in coyote hunts where we just go out to unalive coyotes because we wanted to go out and unalive turkey or, the prey of these coyotes. So what you're saying is just completely made up. And not to mention, like, the contradiction I'm pointing out is that if hunting, the exploitation of prey animals in an ecosystem for human consumption, is conservation, then specifically because of overpopulation is what you're arguing, then why would we be hunting animals that help with the overpopulation issue? That's contradictory to your entire point, right?
It's not, because I literally just looked it up on Indiana DNR, and it literally says that we hunt coyotes based on population. It has to do with the two things that I mentioned, population control and interference with cattle. So what is your question?
Can you tell me what would happen if we stopped hunting predators and prey?
In what situation? Are we talking about where they're local to farms and properties, or are we talking about in the wild?
No, I'm talking about the ecosystem. Like your entire argument so far has been that humans need to manage wildlife because of overpopulation of deer. And we focused on deer. And I pointed out to you that Indiana DNR allows for the hunting of coyotes, foxes, raccoons, and bobcats. Now, coyotes, foxes, and bobcats can consume and predate on deer, mostly on fawns in the spring, or sickly animals, right? Sickly prey. So what you're describing is a contradiction, because your state DNR is literally allowing you to hunt animals that would be helping with the overpopulation issue. So
okay, this is why I understand your point. I understand. Trust me, I understand your point. Now, here is why I asked specifically, are we talking about when they're local to cities, or are we talking about in the wild? Because in the wild, like let's say Yellowstone, for example, where it's just this giant conglomerate of land, the ecosystem functions with minimal human interaction, naturally how it should, where you have a small block of predators at the top, a slightly larger block of herbivores, and then a large group of lower fauna, and then an even larger group of decomposition. That's how an ecosystem functions. When you're talking about Indiana, which mind you, I said I'm from northern Indiana, all right, it's different up there. We don't have coyotes up in northern Indiana. All we have is a shit ton of deer. So what you're talking about is probably in the lower near more Kentucky. I guarantee you that's where the majority of the coyotes are. In the north, we just have a shit ton of deer. You can't just port a bunch of coyotes up to the northern part of Indiana for two reasons. One, you don't want, where I'm from, all of these farmlands to have to be constantly shooting coyotes that run onto their property trying to kill their livestock. And two, it is in fact a bad thing to have predators like coyotes, wolves, and other things walking around where they can interfere with traffic, walking around where they can make it to places like parks.
I decided to just drop him because like the claims he's making are literally just complete bullshit. I'm sorry, like you're just speculating more and lying. I just looked up predators in northern Indiana. There's healthy populations of coyotes, bobcats, foxes, and badgers. So yeah, there are these coyotes in northern Indiana. You're just lying. You're just making up excuses. We spent an hour and a half talking about overpopulation only to basically get nowhere. So yeah, thanks for all of that big old circle of illogic. Oh man. I mean, honestly, like it was a pretty enjoyable discussion at the beginning, but it just really seemed bad faith, and I just couldn't take more speculation. I mean, he was speculating about the sterilization options when he literally like thought I was advocating for going out and like cutting the balls off of deer. Like that's not modern sterilization of wildlife. I'm sorry, nobody's doing surgery on wildlife. That's ridiculous. Um, but yeah, I mean there are literally like super emerging technologies that are seemingly very effective, especially for ungulates like deer and elk. So yeah, should more leftists hunt? I mean, honestly, I think if more people were forced to see the violence that it takes to, bring you meat to your table, I think a lot less people, would be eating meat. So in some ways, yes, I do agree that more people should go out and hunt because they'll probably not enjoy it. But no, we shouldn't have more hunters. There needs to be less hunters. Need a lot less hunters. Actually, like it's funny because hunters are like a dwindling population too because nobody wants to like perpetuate that. I don't know. It's hard to make the argument for going out and like exploiting wildlife when yeah, like Ciara said, like literally dwindling wildlife populations. So you already know all the conservation arguments. But yeah, we had some pretty good two adult discussions today, which is pretty solid. So let's see if we got any other requests that seem to be adults. I've only got probably about 15 to 20 minutes left, but we've got one more request, so we'll bring him up and see. Bert. I don't see a Bert in the requests. What's Bert talking about? Hunting is enjoyable and ethical. Interesting. I'd love to hear that argument. It is all regulated and registered, and it's the lottery. It's ethical. Interesting. That reminds me of a specific movie where it was legal to go out 1 month or 1 day of the year and just do whatever evil stuff you wanted to do. So if that was legal, would that make it ethical? Because I don't think what's legal is ethical. And just because something's enjoyable does not make it ethical either. So just because you enjoyed doing something doesn't make it okay, especially when there's a victim. So exactly, cute bunny, bro. Your comment got filtered, but yeah, the purge. I couldn't even remember the name. I knew somebody would think of it. The purge. There's no problem in hunting as long as you harvest and eat animals you hunt. Okay, so we could hunt humans or animals. So should we like hunt specific humans? Maybe like hunting humans that have disproportionate ecological impact, should we hunt those humans? As long as we eat them, as long as we harvest them for eating. I don't know about that. I don't like that. What was the first year of being vegan like? Was it hard? It honestly was not for me. I had been plant-based, like mostly plant-based, for probably a year. And then I met my now wife, and we were dating at the time, and she had been vegan for like 5 years. So it was really easy to just completely make the switch for diet. And then I was still hunting when I met her, but I was starting to like question the ecological impacts of hunting. So that again for me was like recognizing that I was harming someone unnecessarily and to the detriment of the ecosystem, and it wasn't even healthy for me to consume their flesh. Like, yeah, it was very easy to stop. Yeah, yeah, I don't get the logic either. It's not about their body, it's about their life. I'm so confused. Is Carla like Carla, are you vegan? Or are you I went vegan. Oh yeah, you are. I went vegan 17 years ago. Awesome. I was about to say, like, you're making vegan arguments, Carla. I have a sustainability degree. I think we're going to talk about ending hunting. We have to talk about connecting wildlife systems again. No, yeah, I totally agree. I think we should have wildlife corridors. That's a big part of some of the restoration work on our farm. So we're currently we're turning what was conventional like hay a hay farm into like a more biodiverse area. Almost half of our property is devoted for wildlife. And since we do rescue quote unquote farm animals who would be at risk of predation by coyotes or fox or other species, I have to, enact ethical conservation management for this wildlife, like coyotes or other predators. So we have wildlife crossings. Since we have some other wilderness areas around us, we know kind of the movement patterns for some of these predators. So we make sure we have a clear, wildlife corridor for them to avoid coming in contact with our animals that we care for. So many vegans in chat. What's the difference between livestock protecting versus hunting? So hunting is typically referring to like exploitation for human consumption. Like even killing animals for population control, like the last guest was saying, that technically wouldn't be hunting. That would be culling. But as soon as you start using their corpses for human consumption, that becomes hunting because you're going out and treating their bodies as resources. So, yeah. So when I talk about hunting, I'm talking about going out intentionally targeting animals, consuming the animal, or treating them as a resource. That would be hunting. Protecting livestock or protecting companion animals can be done through nonviolent practices. So we don't need to go out and cull or harm animals. Obviously, like in situations of extreme, like dire self-defense, such actions would be justified to kill predators, but honestly, if you get to that point, you've probably done something wrong, as far as like being too close to the animal or putting your animals at risk that you care for at excess risk of predation. So there are nonviolent ways to like protect your companions and your family. Do you respect your harvest? You can respect an animal without spirituality. I don't know even what that means, Yopa. Like, how do you respect somebody by killing them when you don't need to? Like, that's super disrespectful. You couldn't protect yourself, let alone your family, brother. Okay, okay, Smash. You're such a big man. I bet you love exploiting little innocent animals, huh? Such a big man. I respect the butternut squash that I harvested from my garden. Heck yeah. I love some butternut squash. Yeah, there's no way to humanely kill someone who did not want to die or need to die. That's right, vegan Siren. I don't even know what that has to do with like any of the topics, but oh, because I said protect our companions. I'm vegan because I like harming sentient plants. Butternut squash ended up in our garden with us planting it. That's cool. Yeah, that's called a volunteer, Donna. I love volunteer plants. Those are sometimes the best plants, like tastiest. And usually they're the best acclimated to your environment too, because maybe they already grew there, their parent grew there and then set seed somewhere. Yes, when you don't waste the human and consume them, yes, you're respecting them. Oh, that's weird, Yopa. Oh, wait, sorry, I said human instead of animal, but humans are animals. So you basically just justified uh, eating humans. US bird poop. Oh, yeah, maybe so. Yeah, there are nonviolent ways to protect your family. I'm talking about specifically like conservation strategies to protect from wildlife. So, yeah, I don't know. We're not talking about martial arts or something, bro. But there are a few vegan martial artists or former martial artists here in the chat. Maybe they would tell you about how they protect themselves or whatever. Not in every situation there isn't. Well, that's funny because I know you heard me say that in situations of self-defense, it would be justified to kill a predator. So, and they aren't nonviolent. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, you don't even know what I'm talking about. Like a fence, is that violent? Oh no, like a fence. It's so violent to the coyotes. Oh man, how could I fence the coyotes out of this area? It's so violent. Oh, how could you set up a noise deterrent? It's so violent. Oh, how could you let your dogs bark at a coyote? It's so violent. Come on, man. Like there's tons of nonviolent ways to protect from like predators. And like people know this, like even like ranchers know this. Exactly, Carlo. I actually need to upgrade my fence. The deer have been coming in. I stopped using the electric fence part of my fence, and the deer have come in and started enjoying my winter spinach. So, what's Yopa lying about? What's Yopa lying about now? Oh, there's an interesting comment. MH Bus says, ducks kill fish, frogs, and insects, so we should hunt them to limit more animal death. By that logic, like we should unalive humans too, right? Because humans kill and harm like far more animals than ducks. Like that's silly logic. Like we don't that's not how we judge like other animals. Like that's a good idea. Motion detector. 0 out of 10 rage bait. Okay. I don't know why this is rage bait, but how enraging to call exploitation not conservation. Wow. Yep, all the analogies. 10 out of 10 cope. Yep. Still no requests, so I guess we did it, y'all. We got through all the non-vegans who wanted to talk about conservation. I appreciate all y'all hanging out today. I'm gonna try. I'm not gonna make any promises, but I want to do at least like a weekly live like this, just to keep some of the conservation discussions happening. Yeah, we do need a list of analogies. What are we meal prepping this week? I don't know. It's a good question. I still have some of our winter squash to process. I've been doing a lot of sweet potatoes too that we grew. I like the purple sweet potatoes, like the ube kind. They're really good. Vegans prefer to argue than educate. I struggle to find a kind vegan that isn't so angry. Bonnie, I like to think I don't get too angry. The last guest I might have gotten angry with just because like they were going in circles, and I get frustrated with like irrational or like illogical kind of like rhetoric and discussions. So but yeah, there are a lot of angry people online. Like unfortunately I think these algorithms like promote that. So it makes sense that you might have only seen angry vegans. Nice. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have a sweet potato for dinner. No, we finished our calzone that we made. Made a really good impossible sausage calzone with some, is it Follow Your Heart? I think it's Follow Your Heart mozzarella. See if I can join another day when I'm not my kids. Yeah, no worries, Matthew. Appreciate you hanging out. Definitely give me a follow, and I see you did, so hopefully I'll see you around. And I'm about to, yeah, I'm already hungry. It's almost 5:15 here, so I'm about to start thinking about dinner. I always dread asking my wife what she wants for dinner though, because she's a little picky. She's hard to get, especially with new meals. But I think we finished all our leftovers. We were eating the biscuits and gravy that we made for Thanksgiving for like 2 weeks. So yeah, Esther's gonna be cooking for you, I think, for a little while. At least you can have some solid foods now, though. That's good. I still can't get over that last guest, like just straight up lying about Indiana. Like I was like, how can he make claims like that? Like maybe Indiana's had crazy land use changes and stuff that like leads to somebody to think that there's no predators in the northern part, but that was wild. That was wild. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it here, y'all. I appreciate everybody hanging out and contributing and challenging the irrationality in the comments. Always appreciate that. And yeah, appreciate the support. And we'll see y'all.